2, 3. Good evening. A few minutes late, but let's call the committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, May 14th to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchuk is absent. Alderman Talaco. Alderman Meyer. Alderman Hancher.
Here.
Alderman Bach.
Here.
Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderman Bratt. Alderman Gebhardt.
Here.
And Mayor Nurbin.
Here. First up, we have approval of the meeting minutes from April 9th. Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, we have a couple of discussion items. First is a presentation of Phase 1 baseline report for a real estate market analysis of the Port Washington Road corridor between County Line Road and Glen Oaks Lane. Take it away.
I just want to remind everyone that back in March, we approved the contract with Redevelopment Resources for the RFP, or for the market analysis, and Kristen Fish-Peterson's here from Redevelopment Resources to give us Phase 1 of the baseline report. This is just basically background data. We're not drawing any conclusions on this. This is the first of many phases in this project, so we're just going to have her speak and let us know what she found out about the city of Mequon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Kristen Fish-Peterson from Redevelopment Resources, and I'll go through the slides here. You received the baseline report, I believe, in your packet. Again, to reiterate what Jack said, this is just data that we gathered. We're not assuming anything yet or drawing conclusions, but we've done data gathering. We may discover more data as we go along, but the purpose of the study is to provide a thorough documentation of the corridor and discover its highest and best uses from a future land use perspective and identify best opportunities for future redevelopment. So in that vein, bring me that closer, thank you. What we've done is we reviewed internal documents, we gathered, whoops, this isn't advancing. I hit enter? Stuck? Here?
Yeah, but I don't know why that's frozen.
IT's not here today.
You start over.
That's what I do, turn it off and turn it on again.
It was just frozen.
That's what IT would tell you to do.
It's just, there's
You tried rebooting.
It was stuck on the first slide.
but it's weird though. Why would the screen not be? Actually, what's on the
As long as it's working up there, like a slide presentation like that? Okay, all right. There we go. Sorry for that delay. So as we're keeping in mind the future land use and highest and best. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, that's good. Okay.
You can, yeah.
So as we're keeping in mind the future land use and highest and best use of these properties for redevelopment potential in the future, we gathered internal documents and reviewed them. We gathered and analyzed demographic, geographic, workforce, and economic data. We did a competitive analysis, which we probably will dig in deeper as we go along. And then we're working on analyzing trends locally, regionally, and nationally as they relate to the commercial real estate development. This all culminated in this baseline report. So we'll start with the demographic overview, and we looked at age and population. Your population is expected to grow, but only slightly in the next 5 years. What I like to see about these age charts is that you have a significant young population, age 15 to 24. Your workforce age is not the largest percentage of your population, but you also have a large number of retirees here. So you want to keep all that in mind when you're thinking about everything from housing to business to services, medical, everything. So as far as employment is concerned, the largest percentage of your population is employed in the industry of services, and that category is a large category. It has a lot of things, a lot of occupations in it. Second only by manufacturing, and then the fire categories, finance, insurance, and real estate. When we look at the same employment by occupation, you can see where those services break out. That includes management, business, financial, professional, sales, administrative support, and then other services, which would include hospitality, medical, some of those things. County-wide, you can probably pick out Mequon in these projected employment numbers and the current employment numbers where there is a high level of education and health services as well as other professional services. You can see that the major categories are all growing over the next 10 years, from 2020 when the data was first drawn. This was a chart we got from the Ozaukee County Economic Development Office. As far as educational attainment is concerned, over 70% of your population has a bachelor's degree or higher, so a very well-educated community, which also translates to income. In incomes over 100,000, you currently have about 64% of your total population earning more than 100,000, and by 2028, that'll increase to 70% of the population. Some of this may not be surprising to you, but it is always interesting to me to update the data and make sure it's still tracking the way you always thought it was. Looking at real estate now, we looked at demographics, now we're going to look at the physical real estate. We see this in just about every community that we study. We do a lot of housing studies, but 7,000 of your residential units are single-family detached homes, or one unit detached, which means a single-family home. One unit attached would be a duplex or a single-family home attached to another single-family home. Vacancy trends bumped up a little bit in 2021. They're coming down. And in 2022, it looked like it was about 7%, but we have pretty good anecdotal evidence that vacancy rate is much lower in 2024. Just by the amount of inventory that's on the market for sale or rent. And it's tight everywhere. Median rents, like every other market, have been increasing steadily for the last 5 years or more. And that is another indicator of demand. So we took some time to interview stakeholders in your community. We talked to city staff, we talked to the Ozaukee County Economic Development Office and the chamber staff. We talked to select investors, developers, and commercial brokers, and some business owners. Conversation was, I always know when I've interviewed enough people because I start hearing the same answers. And the conversation went similarly with everyone. But not a lot of people had spent time imagining the future of Port Washington Road, so it gave them a chance to do that when we spoke with them. Many of them thought more residential development would be appropriate on the north end of the study area, and our north end was Glen Oaks. So north of Glen Oaks is where they thought more residential could go along Port Washington Road. Again, these are people's opinions, so we take note of them and then we check them against what we believe to be true about the market. There's a lot of medical, there's a cluster of medical, and there are a significant number of medical specialties within that existing cluster, but that would be something that could even be increased as far as business attraction is concerned, because when someone wants to make medical appointments, they'll typically spend time elsewhere in the community doing other things. So if they're coming here for a plastic surgeon or dialysis or something else, they may have an opportunity to spend more time and money in your community if they're coming from out of town. So people thought that might be an opportunity in some of the existing office space. People always like more restaurants. They also indicated a need for more assisted living options. Apparently there's a long waiting list at Newcastle, which indicates demand. And then we briefly discussed with many of them the opportunity to recruit family entertainment or indoor recreation, things like trampoline parks or rock climbing walls, laser tag, places where people can go to hang out with their family as a group or with friends. We then looked at the competitive analysis. I like Googling images for words and seeing what Google comes up with. So this is our icon for competitive analysis. This data is from Placer AI, and we looked at the comparison of competitive retail nodes with visits greater than 10 minutes in duration. We looked at the Mequon Town Center area, Port Washington Road, Bayshore Mall, and Grafton Commons. And if you see a difference in this chart than the one that was in the report you received, it's because we didn't have a large enough area captured for the Mequon Town Center area, so we requested another point of data from Placer so we could expand that. And so Mequon Town Center's expanded site here is a little different from the report you received. But if you look at this, people spending more than 10 minutes, you have the same number of people coming to the Mequon Town Center as you do Grafton Commons. We believe that the Mequon corridor study area is significantly higher because of the employment and the residential that's there, whereas you don't have the medical base or the office base in the other areas that's as significant as it is on Port Washington Road. We then looked at daily visits by retail node, so by those same areas, and it looks like the town center and Grafton Commons and the pavilions are all tracking along the same path. Bayshore and then the corridor study area, we differentiated between the Mequon pavilions and the corridor study area because we do have a much broader area for the study area and we wanted to look at it as a whole, and we believe that's high because, again, the jobs that are there with the healthcare and the office space and then the residents that live there, whether they're at this assisted living place or elsewhere. And the Bayshore is much higher on the weekends because of the entertainment options that they have there. And then hourly visits, again, time of day, we have more employment in the corridor study area. But it's interesting that the Mequon Town Center expanded site takes a bump in the evening, and that would be the restaurants and I think the dining opportunities that you have. Those are very attractive to people. So as far as the Port Washington Road visit trends, when Placer AI looks at data, they look at visitors as everybody coming from outside the area. And we had that area on the very first slide, if you remember this. We took a quarter mile in every to the east and the west, and that's what we're calling the study area. So we did capture some residential there. But when Placer AI looks at as visitors, it's people coming from outside the study area. Employees are people who work there, and then study area residents live in the study area. So wondering why these two show a decrease, I think we can probably attribute that to the construction. Just creating less opportunities for people to come. Construction that went on I-43 and the interchange. Again, using those same categories of visitors, employees, and residents, we looked at the top 10 favorite places by those audience types, and this is Placer tracking their cell phone data, where they're going and where they're spending their time. So the favorite places include Bayshore, the Marcus Theaters, and the pavilions for all three categories. For just visitors and employees would be Mayfair and Whitestone Station, and so on down the line there. This is interesting as far as the trade area is concerned. For the calendar year of 2023, 100% of the visits were tracked. And it's not super clear on this slide, but way up in Green Bay, there is a concentration of green along with some green and a little red from Chicago and a little bit of red in Madison. So you're drawing people from Green Bay, Madison, and Chicago, the Chicago area, up to Port Washington Road. And I think that's very interesting. Your market is bigger than you think it is. So we indicate those as secondary markets for you. As far as retail gaps are concerned, Placer looks at the number of dollars in the market that are able to be spent in the market. And unmet demand means that there are more dollars in the market by people that live here and have disposable income than there are places to spend those dollars. And these are the categories where there is unmet demand. So you have the money here, you just don't have as many places to spend it. So these would be considered opportunities from a retail recruitment perspective or a hospitality recruitment perspective. And I will say automobile dealers show up on every single chart. I just don't think we can have automobile dealers in every single community and every single neighborhood that we survey, so we don't give that very much credibility. We just don't say you're going to need to recruit some automobile dealers. It's just not. That's a category is kind of a mislabeled category. But you do have opportunities in building materials and supplies, other general merchandise stores, lawn and garden equipment, of course, bars and drinking establishments and beer and liquor and wine stores, and then automotive parts and accessories and tire stores. As far as what you do have, as far as you have surplus then of these retailers in the market, and this means that there are more outlets for buying these goods in the area than you have disposable income in the community. So that they're successful is they're drawing in income and sales from outside the market. But we wouldn't be recommending to attract businesses in these categories. So the next steps, we will take a deeper dive into the trend analysis and look at short, mid, and long-term opportunities for retail, office, and residential development. We'll look at absorption rates and vacancy rates. We've started to do that already in all of the categories. We'll identify redevelopment sites and work with staff to prioritize these based on their availability, access, size, function, and recommended future use. If we need to access GIS data, we'll be doing that with staff. Otherwise, I think we have a subscription to GIS. We just want to make sure it's showing same results. Any potential future changes to zoning will be identified, and then we'll study the area for kind of regional or potential clustering, identification of transformative redevelopment, and economic drivers. Are there any questions?
Thank you. I found the baseline analysis pretty intriguing so far. So some of the, especially some of the, what do we have enough of, what don't we have enough of, that was, some of it was intuitive, some of it wasn't. So I think it was off to a good start, but I'd open it up to any questions that any of the council might have. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you. This is a very nice start. Way to do a deep dive in our market. My main caution for you is, and I'm looking at uses and seeing building material and supply. And some of the uses, it might be natural to recommend, but you may want to cross-check the Uleo Creek corridor, which we recently approved and is also on Port Washington Road. And we wouldn't want, for example, the supplies and things of that nature is meant to kind of be in Uleo Creek, I'm pretty sure. And so that kind of helps narrow down what are the potential categories, because we're not too interested in automobiles, if I'm not mistaken. And I was really interested in that other merchandise, general merchandise stores, and it's really hard to understand what that means, but there seems to be a huge demand there. And it's not restaurants, it's not shoe stores, it's general merchandise stores. And so that'd be interesting moving forward. And then as you look at just the land and the zoning, I think that's partially what we're all really excited about. And staff's given you some great directions, but certainly all of the parcels between Port Washington Road and I-43 have quite a few, well, first of all, industrial buildings, and also a lot of kind of older buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s, and there's just complications with them. A lot of them are condominium sites, so you have like office parks that are split up into condo buildings. And so if you could just look holistically at kind of some of those bigger issues. We also have residential condominiums in this Port Washington Road corridor that are having really similar issues. They're getting really old and not keeping up with maintenance and appearance. And so how do you address like these condominiumized sites is definitely an issue that we've experienced, and you really hit the nail on the head as it relates to the senior housing. And we hear that quite a bit as well from our residents, and it's hard to tackle this issue because it's so market-based. And how do you convince someone to come in and build another continuum of care type project and not just like a memory care? So curious, like, how do we accomplish that? Because we do have a great population that wants to age in place for the rest of their lives here, and I don't feel like they have those options in the future. So thanks again.
This is not a problem that's unique to Mequon either. So we're doing a housing study in Sheboygan right now, and they're overbedded in skilled nursing care, but they're underbedded in independent living. So, and the average age of people entering those units has gone from 75 to 91. So people are definitely staying home longer.
Wow. Alderman Bach.
I was interested in that. It seems like people are going to Mayfair and Bayshore. I mean, on one of those slides, it seemed like that. I was wondering, it'd be interesting to see what are people going to, anecdotally, I hear people that don't hit like clothing shopping. Are people going to Mayfair, to Nordstrom's? Are they going to high-end places that the city of Mequon doesn't have, as far as, get to Alderman Parrish's question, what kind of stores are we missing in the city?
We can dig into that. I've always had a philosophy of that next level shopping experience. So even if you had it here, they'd want to go somewhere else. The people from Madison, Milwaukee want to go to Chicago. The people from Chicago want to go to New York, et cetera, et cetera. But in my mind, it's that next level shopping experience. But yes, if we can, and I did speak with the Brixmore folks at length about their tenant mix, and he said they're doing well. And if there are vacant stores that you can see, they're probably under contract, or they have a lease that hasn't expired yet. So they're working on everything. So.
I had a clarifying question that I thought of when Alderman Parrish was asking you a question. Is the over-under supply, that's not just within the study area, it's all of Mequon, or is it specific to the study area?
Within 5 miles of the study area.
Okay, so it's more regionally.
It is bigger than
Okay.
just the corridor.
Yeah,
hard
so
to
it's an
tighten that down.
unmet need, but we might not meet the need there because of those zoning issues, but we'll have to sort through that, I agree. There's some things that are on there some things on there we may not want, period, or we may not want exactly there, but it's good to know about them nonetheless.
Yep, and I wouldn't advocate for trying to recruit every one of these unmet demands into the Port Washington Road corridor. We'll get into those recommendations on what makes sense and where we see opportunities to play off of what's already there, so.
Perfect, thank you. Alderman Hancher.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. We had talked earlier about trying to lure like a boutique hotel or motel into that area. Would that be something feasible along that corridor to increase people coming to the area?
Just from what the research we've done so far, I would say yes. You have opportunity there for a new product, which I think would make sense, but we could dig into that a little deeper as well. Mm-hmm.
Alderman Talaco.
One thing that kind of just resonated with me is the map that you showed us, and you said Greater Milwaukee area, however, Green Bay, Chicago, and some of Madison. And typically, I feel like in this area, most kids, when they're going off to college, go to Madison. Green Bay is very popular because of the Packers, and then we have Chicago because they have great schools there too. That a lot. So those areas. How do you explain that? Is it like a secondary market? As I feel like that's more of like probably kids that are in college or kind of going out on their own for that time.
That's a good
and then
question.
coming back. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, we can look into the data and see if we can tell, what characteristics those shoppers or users have. I'll dig into that. I'll have Dana look into that more.
Alderman Pratt.
Great point about the students,
Yeah.
though.
Got to push to talk, sorry.
Okay, well, I'll just hold on. So, first of all, thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. Sort of what Alderman Hanser was saying sort of reminded me of a conversation we had up here a few months ago about the need to have a diverse sort of stock in our community, like housing, industrial, having an array of sources. So, I see this area as one of these last sort of opportunities to sort of get to sort of work with a canvas of variety. If you go down the whole stretch, there's some rural land still left. There's stuff that's early suburbs. There's the office park era. And then my kid's favorite Halloween store, the Spirit store. So there's a variety of things to work with. So I think it behoove us if we think about this as like a way to provide some diversity and sort of revenue for our community too as well.
Any other questions for our consultant on the baseline analysis? Looking like no. Good job so far. We're excited to get to the next phases,
Thank you.
as you can tell by some of the questions.
So are we. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Next, piggybacking off that, we have a discussion regarding proposed updates to streetscaping plans for Port Washington Road between Zedler and Mequon Road.
So we have Luke is here from Harwood Engineering. Many of you may recall we were here about a year ago to discuss the concept plan. So we have now updated the concept plan based on some of the discussion that we had with the council back in March of last year. There was a couple of high points that the council wanted us to look at. Basically, one of them was whether we should go with pavers versus the stamped asphalt at the intersections. We should look at reducing features that result in additional maintenance costs. We should eliminate median closures along the Dantes Bay Road intersection, and then review the possibility of implementing improvements north of Mequon Road. So what we did here with this plan is we kind of modified our plan based on a lot of those things that the council was looking for, and we put them in sort of levels to kind of give you a breakdown of what we think a cost would be for each of those levels. So baseline level basically would be just the median work. So there would be just the changes to the medians, turn lanes, things like that. And then we have a level 1, which includes the light fixtures, which would be 28 street fixtures and 52 pedestrian fixtures that are along the corridor. Level 2 includes the median, trees, median, perennials, and decorative concrete. That's the phase where, if you may recall, we had a bunch of annuals and flower pots that really increased the maintenance costs. We removed those from level 3 completely. We did keeping them in level 4 if we need to revisit this in several years, if we feel that there's not enough pop along the corridor, we could add those back, but we felt as a cost issue and as a maintenance issue, that was one of the drivers for removing those. And then finally, level 5 includes gateway neighborhood signage. We have 3 locations on the plan that show some type of signage. We don't know what that is yet. We would probably end up bringing that back to you at a later date. We just identified those locations and determined they were probably the most fitting for signage. So what we're looking for in terms of feedback on this concept plan is, are we going in the right direction? We've tried to meet the requirements. And Luke is here. He'll kind of hit the highlights of all the different aspects of the plan from going from south to north, and then after that we can answer any questions. As a reminder, we did purposely delay implementation of this plan until 2025 because of the conflicts with the I-43 project. So based on our schedule at this time, we're looking at to get this bid out in October with construction of next spring. So I'll leave it to Luke, and he can kind of walk you through the corridor from south to north.
Thanks, Jack. That was a good summary of what we have modified from the previous plans, and I'll just run through these drawings fairly quickly and give you another brief summary of where we ended up with the improvements. So as we move from south to north, on each end you can see that we started off with more of a gateway entry feature into the Port Washington corridor. In the center is where the signage to be determined, and that doesn't really affect the concept or our design. We still can move with the improvements as the base level, as Jack explained, without the signage, and that can be added at a later date. That's the box placeholder there in the rendering. And then as we move north, we get this secondary transition zone that still has some design elements, the concrete banding and the perennial planting beds and shrub beds that are going to be low maintenance as much as possible, along with extra tree plantings in the medians. We followed those themes that the north end has the same progression of design themes. This is the Dodges Bay intersection. This is where we opened up these the turn lanes. They were closed off on the previous plans, and we removed this section of median, so the turn movements would still stay the same. That was one of the bigger concerns. And that is also a place where we removed some of the features, design elements that would move to the level 4, or level 5, sorry. In the center of the corridor, this is where the residential apartments are, and more some of the single-family homes to the east and west. So we have more of a grove of trees, and that's kind of our central point as you move through the corridor. These areas, groves of trees with the concrete banding again, and crushed granite. So again, low maintenance, but adding interest. And then we moving into that transition zone. This is still the second section of the central portion of the corridor adjacent to the residential. And now we're moving north into the shopping area, and we transition again, doing what we can with these medians by adding some trees. They're smaller, and we have the turn lanes that restrict us, but additional crosswalks that would be level 4. And then we make it up to Mequon Road, where we have the signage again denoting the corridor, where we're distinguishing, entering this portion of it. And then the portion connecting to the 43. That would need the approval of the DOT, and this is a concept to carry that theme into the off-ramp. then the next sheet, we added just blow-ups of a typical island, so you could see a little bit more in detail on the dimensions and the spacing. And some of the design intent images at the bottom. And then the light fixtures, cut sheets of the pole that was selected. And then we get into the previous plan set. So quick summary.
So basically, the only thing else I'd like to add is that we did, by doing levels, the base level to level 3 with the elimination of the pots and the annuals, we save about $20,000 a year in terms of maintenance costs. We also did look at going north along the corridor towards, we go a half mile from the TIF boundary per statute, which takes us to about the southern leg of Eastbrook Drive. We didn't really see an opportunity there. Most of the islands there are concreted off. There are about 16 light fixtures that could be replaced, but they're relatively new in terms of compared to the existing ones south of Mequon Road. So we didn't feel that they would get the bang for the buck by going any further north, and you would also have this kind of awkward transition between the old and new, where the TIF boundary allows us to go in terms of the spending. So you would have a kind of an awkward transition location there. So basically what we're looking for is an opinion from you in terms of whether we're on the right track. Are you still preferring the stamped concrete or the pavers in the intersection crossings? Are you acceptable or supportive of additional signage along the corridor? And any other questions or concerns that you may have at this time. As a reminder, this is all be paid for through cash reserves that are in TIF districts 4 and 5, so there's no impact to the general fund with regard to the cost of the project.
Thank you, Jack. Whoa, that's hot. Are there any questions first before we get into the decisions we have to make? Questions or comments? Alderman Gebhardt.
I got a couple of comments. I would just say as I went through that, I was very much in favor with the stamped concrete as we were looking at that as an option. One of the questions I had, as I recall from our last meeting, was just talking about the lighting and trying to get some uniformity down that street, right? Specifically, as we talked about the Donges Bay Road there and having some cutouts in the median, some of that might have restricted the lighting a little bit. Was curious how you solved that problem or how you accommodated for that in your latest concepts.
Well, what we did, and this will require Ozaki County approval, we did kind of leave some smaller islands in place where we can locate the median lights. Now they will have to prove that. I'm not sure what their view is that's going to be, because if you look at the picture on the screen where you can see on both sides of the intersection there's those little small islands. Those would accommodate some of our lights. We did move the one further south, right? Yep, in that location there, and then the one on the north. There's one in that island area. So I think with that we don't have, I would say, optimal light distribution, but we have a lot better than what's out there now. The only way we'd get better distribution out there now would be raising those poles up another 10 feet. I don't think we want to go down that path. I think we're at 25, and going up to 35 gets a little bit too commercial and industrial looking, I think, for when you go that high. So I think we have a lot of a much improved lighting distribution, especially with the pedestrian lighting, but it may not be optimal, but I think it's a great improvement from what's there.
We were able to, the spacing isn't, we were on center for most of the corridor, so we're just a little bit off, but the naked eye won't be able to tell that we have to shift some of those lights. So we still have the rhythm, but the spacing is just a little bit different.
And just to follow up to that, then, as I heard you say, going to the smaller islands, does that pose any problems as we think about winter conditions and snow plowing and, making it more difficult for snow removal or creating potential hazards or additional maintenance because of, snow plows not being able to get in there, if you will, or cutting up the curbs or anything like that?
And if you ask snowplow guy, any obstacles are going to be, they're going to want a clean, smooth surface. There are rumble strips there now, so as far as how they plow that is different than a normal street. So it'd be a different condition, but there's also an abnormal condition currently. So it would just be, and it's not in the lane of travel, it would just be a spot where they'd windrow snow into it.
And there were areas that we couldn't fit landscaping in. They were just we thought they were too narrow, they wouldn't survive. In fact, one of them we looked at was on the screen where the old Centennial was. We now closed off that intersection with the new Medi Spa, so that's coming in off of Dundas Bay. So we looked at trying to maybe do something to extend that turn lane all the way to Dundas Bay Road, but it's just not wide enough and it wouldn't accommodate any landscaping, so we just left it open at that point.
Got any more questions?
One other
Keep going, yep.
follow-up. Concern that I had last time we met was that that Clark Station on Dundas Bay, and coming in from the south side there and closing off that boulevard, because coming in off of Dundas Bay from the south, it gets very backed up at a stoplight, and it's very difficult for any car coming from the south that might be coming on the Dundas Bay to get in there to not block up that intersection. So have you accommodated that within these designs and this concept adequately?
It really doesn't, from what we did there, it doesn't really change much compared to what's out there now. We just added that one small island, but everything else is similar to what's out there now. I mean, yeah, originally we had to extend it the entire way, so you blocked off that access point, but now we open those back up. I mean, if it was a new development, I don't think we would allow 3 curb cuts on that development and that close to the intersection, but it is what it is. It's there now, and so we're just trying to make the best way we can, but we didn't make it any worse. I think we kept it about the same as it was under the current conditions.
Alderman Talaco.
It looks beautiful. I don't have as many technical questions. I'd like to drive through the road just to kind of see that. But the stamped concrete, it's beautiful.
Stamped asphalt.
Or
actually.
asphalt?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. My concern, and maybe it's a mom brain, that it looks like it could potentially be a walking path. Like, I'm sure I'm going to find somebody that thinks that they can walk around that little median. So is there like a different way to size that, or to make it less appealing as far as being a pedestrian way to walk around?
Or you're talking about the concrete around the planters? That's different than the
that's
stamped
different,
asphalt. The stamped asphalt, I think, is for the crossings. Yeah.
We don't want to encourage people walking.
Yeah, I think as those trees mature out there, there will probably be less ability for anybody to walk on there. Maybe it just looks a little misleading now with the size of the plantings on there. But we created that as a nice buffer edge, and we felt that if anything closer, any plantings closer to the road would probably die because of the salt or the snow plowing issues. So I think we can look at that a little closer to see if there's any concern over that, what the width of that is, and to see if we can narrow that down a little bit. But something we never really thought of. So thanks.
Yeah, and in this condition where we have the lawn, and it seems less inviting, more decorative. But there are certain conditions where we got too narrow with the existing islands that you couldn't fit both elements in there.
Well, I've seen it all, and to me, I'm like, I could see somebody that would be walking out there not using the control lanes. I know the speed limit's 35, but most people go 10 over. It's just, I want to make sure that we're not creating, with this beauty, creating something adverse as well.
Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. This is in my district, as well as Alderman Gephardt, so that's why we have a few more opinions. Very pleased with how far we've come. And if you could just pull up section 7 while I'm talking. But there's a few areas that I just wanted to draw attention to and would be interested in more information. First one he's pulling up is section 7, and I've noticed I have kids that go bike through this intersection, and out of all the intersections in Mequon, naturally it feels the most unsafe. And so with, so I guess I have a 2-part question here. One relates to potential technology that we wondering, should we be discussing technology ultimately here? Kind of like what we did with the interurban trail. I know that wasn't the original scope, so I don't want the consultant or staff to feel like, oh, we forgot technology. But now that we've kind of have this beautiful picture, I mean, there is this ongoing safety issue, and there are new technological advancements like noisier, like beeping signals and lights, things like that, that especially, I'm not advocating that for at each intersection in this study area, but I'm just wondering, should it be in the Mequon Road intersection And should we have some kind of allowance placeholder for technology? I don't want to hold up the process, but should we be saying something like 250,000 for, maybe we need to update a couple of the stoplights and just make them more pedestrian friendly? So the technology piece is really where I was going with that. Part two is the placement of the sidewalk. If you could just confirm, it looks like you've actually switched the location of the sidewalk relative to where they were. So like cars don't actually have to go drive over the pedestrian walkway to turn right. They actually have to stop now before the pedestrian walkway. When I'm looking at your drawing, that's what I'm seeing. But I've noticed that to be an issue now with the current situation on the ground, is that the crosswalks kind of don't jive with the way cars are turning. And in order to see, the car has to pull over the pedestrian lane and then make the turn. So I apologize for explaining that a little confusing, but there's something about the sidewalks, or as the crosswalk as they are today, that it feels problematic, that you may have addressed on your drawing here. I'm just confirming that.
Yeah, those crosswalks were placed in, it's pretty tight and there's a lot of stuff going on, like you
Yes.
said, in that intersection. But they were placed to avoid the existing medians and connect into the ADA accessible ramps that are on each corner.
Mm.
So as far as going, we were past the stop points of each lane of travel. As you can see, like up here, there's the stop bar to the north. So we are past that. I'll have to verify on the east side because this is getting improved. I think this sidewalk is based on plans that,
Yeah, we based it on the Mequon Road changes that the I-43 project is contemplating. And so I guess the biggest, I think we like your ideas, but the biggest caveat is that that's a WISDOT controlled intersection, so we're gonna be at their mercy again. And it doesn't always go the way we like it to go, or it takes a little bit longer time, so that may cause some issues with timing on the rest of the project, but.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you could just double check those walkways, and if there's anything that can be done. My final, if you could go to section 5. I brought this point up before. There's a We Energies substation in my district, right at Winding Hollow and Port Washington Road. I do get comments from my residents about this. I got a call today about they're not taking great care of the property. I'll take that up separately with staff. But if We Energies is not going to do anything to beautify this property, and I guess I should ask the question first, has We Energies offered to do anything? But if not, my request would be that our plan show essentially a line of trees in the whole right-of-way around their property. And let's just fence them in with trees and improve the appearance of the corridor and satisfy all the residents around there. If they want to make it into like a pocket park and landscaping and take good care of it, that'd be great, with benches and a place for dogs. But they don't feel like a partner on this particular site. And so my thought is, let's get some natural barriers to shield it in. I'd really like that to happen.
Yeah, I think they're hesitant to do anything on their property, so it would have to be off-site. So I think we can look at that, but yeah, I don't think they're.
So the request would be like right after the side, we can build right after the sidewalk, right? Or put trees
I
in the
remember
right of way?
looking at that right away is a little strange over there, so I'll have to revisit that because the right of way I think actually goes further into the road than it shows.
Does,
so
but that was a mistake that was supposed to be corrected,
Yeah,
and
and
it
I
still
don't-
hasn't been corrected.
Yeah, so we'll have to
So
look at
We
that.
Energies owns part of Port Washington Road, according to the GIS.
yeah, maybe we should ask them if they'd deed that back to the city, have a proper road right-of-way reservation, so we have a little bit of room to do some stuff. I agree, that site's ugly. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest, it's, anything they could do would be a benefit.
And show it on our plan, just so it's part of our plan as
Sure.
well, the drawings. And that's what I have to say. Thank you to my colleagues for listening.
one point to that too is we have to, depending on how much room we can get, there's all those power lines along that edge too. Not that we couldn't do evergreen trees that are shorter, but anything huge would be restricted by those power lines.
Excellent points. I'm going to bring up something real quick on slide, it's on packet page 28. The intersection of Donges Bay and Port Washington Road. I seem to recall the last time we talked about this topic, which has been a number of months, we talked about perhaps entertaining the idea of making a right turn lane from Donjas Bay going to northbound Port Washington Road. And that site, that building has now been torn down. I believe we even talked about it, Planning Commission, making sure they didn't put anything on that corner so that we'd have room to do it someday. It just doesn't look like we've reflected any of those thoughts here. I will acknowledge there's one utility pole that would need to be moved to make that happen, but that is a pain to make a right-hand turn there. In fact, I've seen people just this last week cut through the vacant parcel, through their vacant parking lot, to cut around the corner, because now you can see past it with the building gone. When you're waiting for the light there and there's someone who wants to turn right, there's not enough room to do it. It'd be a real benefit to the intersection if we could somehow make it possible.
Yeah, as part of the Medi-Spa approval, they did dedicate right-of-way there, so we have the right-of-way. I know we talked about a sidewalk going from the Donjas Bay intersection up to the bridge, because there's a sidewalk that stops at the top of the bridge. I don't remember the discussion with the turn lane, but I think there should be enough room to do that, but we'll have to look at that a little closer.
Yeah, we definitely talked about it at committee of the whole, and then this item was on, that Medi-Spa was on Planning Commission just a month or two later, and it came up in passing. I would, if anyone wants to go check the tape, I'd welcome them to verify that my memory's correct, but I'm pretty sure it's correct.
It's a very tight intersection. I mean, it just feels very tight.
Yeah, it's tight, and now that we've removed a building from where we should have a road right of way, it'd be nice to take advantage of it if we could. It'll be impossible on the other side of the road, but that's not as much. No one needs a left turn lane. That's the problem now, is a lot of people are turning left and you can't get around them. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, this looks great. I think you really did a good job listening to all the other feedback, except for the turn lane. Any other comments on the body of work here? What are the decisions we need?
Any decision on that crosswalk, either the stamped asphalt, the pavers, or nothing? I mean, I guess it's always
So
an
it's
option.
nothing stamped asphalt or pavers.
Yeah, those are the options we're asking for. I mean, there is a possibility to do stamped concrete, but I think the same issue that we had with the pavers is with the stamped concrete, is that you're going to get a bump there because of the different materials. So
Yeah.
the stamped asphalt does a little bit better job of alleviating that transition.
So maybe we can eliminate one. Is anyone in favor of doing nothing? Just show of hands. Okay, that one's off the table. So stamped asphalt or pavers. I heard a couple people looking at stamped asphalt. Stamped asphalt, show of hands. Well, there we go. We don't even have to ask the other question.
And the other question was regarding the signage. Did you want to pursue signage in those locations and bring that back at a later date in terms of some design options?
How do people feel on signage? There's just a nondescript obelisk there now, but
Yeah, we purposely left it very blank.
something to denote the area similar to what we talked about for town center. So show of hands in favor of some sort of signage. Looks like we've got a majority, if not a unanimous support for that. So that basically gets us options 1, 2, 3, and 5, and option for the level 4 will be for another day if we decide to go for it.
Correct.
Just so, in case anyone's following along. Okay, are there any other decision points we need to make?
I think that's good.
Well, that was remarkably easy. I think it's due to a good report and a good presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to one ordinance we have for discussion, ordinance 2024-1661, an ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code in connection with clarifying certain definitions, design standards, and location standards for residential development within the city's town center and arrival corridor zoning districts.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I know if you look at the text amendment and all the redlining, it probably looks a little bit more overwhelming and complex than what it really is. One of the first steps we did was just try to clean up definitions and meanings behind certain terminology, just so it's consistent. I think when we did the 2017 text amendment, some of those, some of the precision, I guess, of the definitions of those got a little bit lost. And so we have a proposal in the town center that's been working with us, and some of those inconsistencies came to light. So we wanted to correct that. The other thing, there's two major, I guess, policy changes for the council to discuss tonight. The arrival corridor district, which is essentially from Buntrock to Wauwatosa on the south side of Mequon Road, does not allow a developer to request a project that includes more than a total of 16 units. It's regardless of the style, regardless of the type of structure it's in, there's just no a legal path forward for someone to ask for more than 16 units. So prior to 2017, you could ask for more than 16 units, you just needed to apply for a PUD. And there still is density requirements. The base zoning calls for 16 units per 1 acre. So even if someone were to come forward through a PUD process, we would be measuring the project against that density. PUDs are rezonings, so ultimately the Planning Commission and Common Council have total control and authority. You don't need to make findings should you not like the planned unit development or that rezoning proposal, and you could deny it. Staff's of the opinion that we should continue to allow the opportunity for developers to come forward with projects that include more than 16 units. And if we find that it's of public benefit and it's of high quality design, the city may be compelled to approve it. So that's the first text amendment. The second is that when we were presenting that first one to the Planning Commission, we had a member of the public come forward who is interested in doing a project. It's Lakeside Development. They own the vacant piece that's in front of the reserve. Between like Girox and the memory care facility. That zoning district, the arrival corridor district, as well as the town center zoning district, requires that if you have a parcel that fronts on Mequon Road, you need to provide at least 75% of the ground floor of that structure to be commercial. So the Planning Commission discussed that, asked staff to bring back the following month some additional analysis regarding that. Staff essentially recommended, and the Planning Commission approved, that we maintain that 75% commercial ground level use in the town center zoning district. Again, this is just for parcels that front on Mequon Road. But that we could eliminate it for the arrival corridor district. It doesn't mean that if there is commercial demand and a market for additional commercial space that a developer could not present that. But a couple things have happened since that original language was in there. One, we've changed the style of residential development that can happen in the town center district. You can no longer do a 3-story structure. You essentially have to contain it to 16 units per structure. They can only have ground level entry. So you can't even have a 2nd story entrance to the unit. I think that style of residential development is more consistent with what we see in terms of residential on the Mequon Road corridor. In addition, we've had a lot of development occur in the town center zoning portion of the neighborhood, and there is a lot of ground level commercial tenant space that is white boxed, meaning it's built, it's ready for tenants, but there are no leases or no tenants, users in those locations. If there is the attraction for some additional commercial uses, we would prefer to see them filled up in those existing tenant spaces, and we believe that there's some synergy to the concentration of those commercial uses in that existing town center zoning district where the other commercial is. I would also add that, consultant documents that go back to the early 2000s, and there was a number of them that were done for this particular neighborhood before we implemented zoning, before we implemented the TIF district. All of those documents will tell you that the additional residential units is what's going to drive the desired commercial use in the neighborhood. So we don't necessarily see it as a negative to release, I guess, some of that ground floor development on Mequon Road for individual townhome and walk-up units. One of the things we did add, though, is some design standards, if the council is supportive of this text amendment, to make sure that we're creating some space between the public sidewalk and street and where the front yards of these individual dwelling units at the ground level are, so that there's a little bit of enhanced privacy and a clear delineation between what is the public space and what is that private residential space. If there's hesitation with that, we did suggest to the Planning Commission that instead of having a percentage, that you would only require a minimum of a 1,200 square foot commercial use in those types of structures, again, in the arrival corridor district. And that's based on the sizes of the commercial uses that we allow in that zoning district. Ultimately, the Planning Commission didn't opt for adding that requirement in and recommended removing that standard for the arrival corridor district. So this is on the Common Council agenda for ordinance action tonight. We wanted to make sure there was a full understanding of these text amendments, and if there's any questions that anybody has before you take action tonight, I'm happy to address those now.
All right, any questions? Alderman Meyer.
Back when we, back in I think it was 2016, you were referencing the rival corridor with the 16 units inside there. We specifically had that so that there would be no ambiguity on, we would only allow the 16 units. And that's because we wanted to make sure that we pushed everything more towards the center and out of the rival corridor. And so we wanted to make sure at that time that, like I said before, that should be large enough units because that's an arrival corridor. We don't want to have anything that's bigger than that. During it now, the flavor of the Common Council may have changed during that period of time, but I still think that it should be just left at the 16 units and not worry about the rest of it. I mean, this kind of seems like it's stitched together like the state budget is when the governor gets it and crosses one thing out and adds another thing to
Well,
it.
I think the distinction is that 16 acres didn't contemplate any measure of the size of the parcel.
It's still, you're
Still
not
16
allowed
units
to
per
do
acre.
more than 16 units per a structure. That's still in here. But it just, what's precluded right now is that you couldn't do multiple buildings on a larger site with 16 units. You'd only get one structure with 16 units, or if you did 4 structures with 4 units in it. The challenge could be that in some of the larger sites, or what you could do is actually subdivide parcels in order to achieve the number of units that you really want, and then we're not necessarily getting a cohesive master planned site. There could be, in some circumstances, a circumvention to that in the arrival corridor district, particularly those parcels on Wauwatosa, on the east side of Wauwatosa, south of Mequon Road. So they're 2+ acre parcels. If somebody assembled all of those, we would get a master planned development based on the density of 16 units per acre, still control no more than 16 units per structure. If not, and we don't afford for that opportunity to at least bring that proposal forward, someone could circumvent the code by subdividing each of those parcels and coming in one by one by one, and they wouldn't look cohesive or connected. And that would be my concern.
Well, in my personal opinion side of that, I don't want to see multiple 16-unit apartment buildings set up over inside of that area. And I don't think the residents inside that area would go along with that either for it. So unless we take it out, and the rest of this seems fine, but unless we take it out, I won't be voting for this. And I may make a motion then to do that, to take that section back out, leave it the way it was. And as a matter of fact, I'll make that motion, that it stays the way it was, to the maximum number of dwelling units allowed per development is 16 units and not buried through a PUD.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you. I'm trying to, I understand what the prior council was getting at, and you're trying to get at this uncontrollable growth in apartments. And I certainly could see this accelerating that process. I know as alderman, I get tons of calls from developers about this corridor, and I try to manage their expectations that we're not looking for high density apartments in that area. We do on residential, though. I think we all agree on that. We want people and units to support our vision for the center of town. My concern about the path, the motion, is that I mean, you could have like someone who assembles 5 acres, and you're going to have 16 units on there under that philosophy. And I think ultimately you're just ending up with highly inefficient uses of land. I mean, you're going to get some really odd structures, and ultimately we control it with the PUD. So, I mean, I trust the Common Council to, if we're trying to avoid apartments completely, we just need to strip it out of there and be really upfront and honest with developers that we don't want apartments there. The part that I was really in favor of here was, you know, I do think the first floor commercial was, in a sense, not viable from a market perspective, and it was holding back development. And it would be a lot of empty storefronts. So when I was at that planning commission meeting, I did say, yeah, I don't quite understand why we have this requirement. It should be something much smaller, like 25%. And then I think it came back, it's all stripped out, right? It's not even required unless they want it there.
It's still required in the town center
Yeah,
zoning.
but not
just
in
the
arrival I'm talking about. So it's fine. I think we're all in agreement about some of that stuff. It's the density of apartments, which that wouldn't change. I mean, we're still targeting 16, you know, the same density, right?
Correct. Same density, same limitation on the number of units per building, and the design standards, again, essentially require that these be individual walk-up, first floor, townhome, row house styles. You will no longer, the code does
Yeah.
not allow
These aren't the same
apartment
style.
corridor entry structures.
These aren't the same higher density 3-story structures with, you know, commercial on the ground floor and then 2 levels of apartments above them. That's not even possible at all anymore.
Correct.
So
In
th-
either
th-
district.
These will be more like those side-by-side styles that are along, I forget which road it is. It's not west.
Like
and-
Buntrock,
Buntrock,
Spur
yeah,
16's got
Buntrock,
the
yep.
townhomes, yep.
Alderman Bach.
Not that it matters, but just since you mentioned it, and I wasn't at that planning commission meeting, but the developer, I think you said Lakeside, was interested in that parcel. Were they, after this discussion, were they satisfied, or what happened with that?
Yes, Lakeside Development was the one who spoke at the Planning Commission meeting to introduce the topic. I did meet with them in advance of bringing the text amendment back and had some conversations with them about it. They made the point that even if you maybe imagine like a small coffee shop, like in the Arrival Corridor District fronting on Mequon Road, kind of the question of wouldn't the consumer rather be maybe at the existing coffee shop, Collectivo, where there's a lot more vitality, a lot more, other retailers, other services around, and it's not that really far of a walk, and that's actually what we're encouraging. So, some of the things that he contemplated of if the requirement was in there would likely be duplication of services that we already have. And not only the customer, but the city probably would want the concentration where the, compact development is already happening.
Got it. So if you, maybe Mayor, could simplistically say that we've got the motion on the floor and how that differs from what the proposed ordinance was, so I'm clear on that.
Well, the motion on the floor would be to amend what's here to put it back to 16 units per site, period, regardless of size. I personally think there was a little bit of a oversight back when that was passed, because if you have a 3 or 4 acre site, you're going to get 16 units and that's it. I think that what we're doing here is trying to allow for a little more residential development, more like what we see along Buntrock, where it's those nicer side-by-side units that are less dense inherently and not require first floor commercial we probably don't need because it's hard to support the existing commercial we have now. I mean, there's a lot of empty storefronts that haven't filled up yet. There just aren't bodies to put in the stores in many cases. So that's my view on it, and generally what we talked about at Planning Commission. I think this keeps the same density standards of 16 per acre and gives us a lot of control in the process. And to your point about slowing development down, I think that first floor commercial piece is kind of one of the things that's causing it not to happen as fast. There's just not demand for it. So you get these sites that look unfinished, or maybe in some instances unkept. Alderman Meyer.
I agree with the first floor, retail not being inside there. I mean, I think that is, something that we thought of originally was going to be, the whole arrival corridor was a little bit different. It was going to be kind of the old town type of store in the front, and then in the back or on top having the residential inside there for it, so we'd have a nice little look along the way. That has morphed into a totally different thing from what the original idea was for the corridor. But the fact of the matter of having it on, doing it on 1 acre, that's pretty dense also if you take a look at that. Having 16 units on 1 acre, that's the minimum 1 acre inside. That's pretty tight. I think and one of the reasons why we did this beforehand is to slow down the growth of the apartments on it, because we felt it was better inside of the actual town center itself, but also to the fact of that giving developers a clear understanding of what was expected inside of that area, instead of people coming forward and spending time and money and doing plans and bringing all this stuff forward to have the common council say, yeah, that's not what we want. So that's the reason why we put it down here is the 16 units, and that's what you can get during that area. And I still think we'll have a number of people coming up to take that. The comment from Alderman Parrish about the fact it looked a little weird with somebody puts together 5 acres and it has one 16-unit apartment on it. I mean, that's the developer doing that, putting that together. I don't think anybody would do that, as long as they know that they'd only be able to have 16 units outside of that. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but I don't think that you would see a developer doing that, putting together all those parcels and then just doing the 16 inside of it. So, my comments.
I think the natural consequence of that is we'll vote on the amendment here in a second, but if we pass the amendment, we'll see a lot of people buying parcels and doing CSMs to divide them, and we're going to get it anyway. But it might be a worse product in the end because it's not necessarily going to be cohesive. Alderman Parrish.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I just think the amendment needs a little more something to it if we're really going to consider it, because anyone would just do the CSM split and keep splitting up down sites if you're only going to allow that type of density. So you need some kind of, floor on
It's
this.
almost a false constraint because it's so easy to get around with the CSM.
Yeah, there's such an easy loophole as a developer that I just question what we're accomplishing with this, and if we really don't want that constant subdividing of smaller sites, we need to address that somehow, and I don't even know how you would. I can't come up with any language on the spot. But 16 units for 1 acre is, they're just going to keep splitting up bigger sites, and it's going to keep getting smaller and smaller, and it's incohesive. Everything Director Tollefson said was correct on this point. And it doesn't mean that you want more apartments by voting against the amendment and in favor of this. We're following through on the vision and trying to have a cohesive development. The code is not correct as it's written. It doesn't jive with the development community, and if we don't want apartments there, we need to take it out of the code. So that's what I'm saying.
Any other comments on the, we have a motion and a second on the amendment unless someone votes to amend their amendment. Any other comments on that? Alderwoman Talaco, sorry.
Do we want to see more apartments in that area? And are the apartments that are currently further down in the district full and thriving? I don't know if I agree with that transition, and maybe I'm not completely understanding this, but I don't wanna see 16-unit apartment type structures at all in that area. I think that they're doing a massive job on these row houses already. I don't think they're selling like they thought they were gonna be selling.
Well, these aren't the pocket homes. That's different. The row houses are rentals. Just want to make sure we're clear what we're talking about. These aren't the pocket homes at the back of Foxtown. Not those style.
So is there a way to amend this to allow for less than 16 apartment units?
Are you asking about apartments or are you asking about townhomes? And the distinction for us would be, you know, you can't have a second story unit on its own or a third story unit on its own. The code now limits you to 2 stories, and if you have 2 stories, it's 1 unit that's 2 stories, and you have a front door at grade. So the second story is just a 2-story dwelling. And so they're just really row houses or townhomes attached to one another.
And what is the acreage that's required to have one townhome?
Well, in the town center zoning district, your minimum lot size is a 1/2 acre. In the arrival corridor, your minimum lot size to propose any type of development is 1 acre. And we don't allow single family. Like you wouldn't be able to have a single family home.
No, 1 acre can hold a 16-unit townhome unit building, but they're all side by side. They're not over/under style.
They're not stacked units.
That's what it is now.
That's what it
there's
is right
no
now.
There's no more over/under apartments like we have. What we saw in the first 3
Even
phases.
in the town center.
Yeah.
Well, if I saw the townhomes, that'd be okay. I'd like to reduce the number to like 8.
Well, that would be, we'd have to come back with a completely different text amendment because there are so many intricacies to the zoning that we'd have to run through all of that. Remember too that there are a lot of technical standards that also control massing and density. So there's open space requirements. There's FAR, which means the amount of floor area ratio you can do based on the size of the lot. That's a way of controlling the massing of a structure. We even have that in our commercial districts to make sure the buildings don't look bigger than ultimately the size of the lot. So there's a lot of other design controls. So we'd have to look at all of those things if that's the direction.
We have a motion on the floor to amend what's before us with, what's the exact motion? Striking section.
The motion was actually just to make it nice and simple, to keep the arrival corridor designation, number 3, the same the way it was, no changes.
So just no changes.
Correct. It just says the maximum number of dwelling units allowed per development is 16 units and may not be buried through a PUD.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Are there any other proposed changes to that motion, or let's just vote on that motion and see where it goes? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to keep the 16 units as is with no modification whatsoever. Let's call the roll on that one.
Alderman Talaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
No.
Alderman Bach,
No.
Alderman Parrish,
Nope.
Alderman Bratt,
No.
Alderman Gebhardt,
No.
and Mayor
Okay.
Nurbin.
Or in committee of the whole. No. Motion fails. Okay, so we have the proposal as drafted before us again. Is there a motion or a second on that, or another motion for another different amendment?
I would just move to approve the resolution as proposed.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Meyer,
No.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Talaco,
No.
and Mayor Nurbin.
Aye. Okay, we have the Committee of the Whole planning calendar. Let's skip that as we're well past the appointed time to start the next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take a quick 3-minute break so people can do what they need to do, and we'll be back at 8:01 or maybe 8:02. All right, we're back. Sorry for the delay. Next meeting, we're not to the Common Council meeting quite yet. We still have 2 utility meetings. The first is Mequon Municipal Water Utility Commission meeting. We'll call that meeting to order and call the roll, please.
Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Hancher.
Here.
Commissioner Bach.
Here.
Commissioner Parrish.
Here.
Commissioner Bratt.
Here.
Commissioner Gebhardt.
Here.
Commissioner Nurbin.
Here.
And Commissioner Chalaco. Here.
First up is approval of the meeting minutes from April 9th.
Second.
Motion in the second. Any comments or questions on those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. We just have one item. It's a discussion item, approval of the reimbursement for Swan Ridge Farms, the Milwaukee Waterworks meter pit and upsizing transmission main. Take it away, Jim.
So as the Water Commission knows, about a year ago, the city entered into a development agreement with the developer for Swan Ridge Farms for oversizing of the water main through their development for the purposes of the water utility to use for the utility as a whole. So the formula was defined in that developer's agreement. It is a win-win for both the developer and the utility. The developer only pays for the infrastructure that is necessary to serve their development, and the utility pays for the oversizing of that infrastructure that we will use as a second loop to our utility, which was contemplated in our master plan. It's just we hadn't planned on doing it for 5 or so years down the road.
Move approval.
Motion and a second. I understand also the anticipated cost originally was higher than it came in at, so we saved a little money to boot. So, any further comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none. Do we need a roll call vote on this? Just to be safe, yeah, well. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Chalaco. Aye. Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher.
Aye.
Commissioner Bach.
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish.
Aye.
Commissioner Bratt.
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt.
Aye.
Commissioner Nurbin.
Aye. That item is approved. We just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned, and we will immediately start the Sewer Utility District Commission. Call that meeting to order. We can let the record reflect that everyone who was here before is still here. First up, we have approval of the minutes from October 30th and November 14th.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions on those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. First up, we have, well, the only 2 items we have tonight, 2 resolutions. The first is Resolution 4124, resolution denying the request for a sanitary service deferral agreement for the property located at
A deferral from the Mequon sewer utility to that lateral connection. Staff is recommending denial on the basis of the Code of Ordinance, which requires connection, and notes that there is a lateral otherwise extended to the property line, and is therefore recommending denial of the deferral. I will just note that should the Sewer Utility District Commission or subsequently the Common Council consider granting the deferral, it should be conditioned upon the execution of the template deferral agreement.
Thank you. I looked at this item last night, and this one has some parallels to another item we took up a few months ago for a different property. While there is a lateral at the curb, the structure is 800 to 900 feet away to the east. It's an abnormally long, narrow lot. So the stub for the connections right on Cedarburg Road, and the house is all the way to the river. There's also, interestingly, no way to relocate the house to anywhere that isn't in the floodplain, because almost the entire lot is in the floodplain, save for maybe a 30 or 40 foot section of the driveway closer to Cedarburg Road, where it's actually impossible to build a house because the lot's only 50 feet wide at that point. So I find myself in favor of granting another deferral where our policy says we would otherwise require one for those reasons. I think it ends up being just too much infrastructure cost. That no one would reasonably spend in excess of 100,000. The last estimate I had was about $200,000 for a piece of infrastructure like this on the last property we voted for a deferral on. So I, for one, don't support the motion or the staff conclusion on this, even though it's perfectly in concert with our policy. It's too onerous for the property owner.
I'll second that.
It wasn't a motion. It's just an opinion. That could be a motion, though. A motion to deny the denial or approve the deferral. That's a motion to approve the deferral. Is there a second? Or are there any questions?
Second.
Just for the purposes of clarity, that includes the condition that Ms. Lundin identified that the property owner needs to execute the appropriate form to do that.
I would ask the motioner if that includes that. I would assume it does, but I cannot attest.
Correct.
Thank you.
Accepted.
So a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Alderman Meyer, Commissioner Meyer.
So there's no designation in between, in the way it sets up right now, that it's just 200 feet of the property line, correct? It's got nothing to do about the structure itself?
Correct.
Yeah, it's an oddity created by the fact we have a code that doesn't perfectly cover every possible nuance of the way lots are chopped up and laid out. This is just one of those really long, narrow lots that it's a highly non-conforming lot in a lot of ways.
So maybe we should take a look at changing that a little bit inside of ours.
When the new deputy utilities director is hired, I've requested a sewer connection policy similar to the water connection policy that would otherwise address scenarios just like the water policy did of defining which properties may be eligible for a deferral or exemption.
We can agree to put it on our own work plan. It sounds like when Kristen gets some help when that vacancy's filled, it's a good project for someone to cut their teeth on. I would agree, yeah. Any other discussion? If not, let's also call the roll on this item.
Aye.
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 Aye. That resolution is recommended onto the council. Our next resolution is Resolution 4125, a resolution authorizing the designation of 2010 West Ranch Road as the replacement site location for the construction of Lift Station E on Ranch Road. Quick overview from staff, please.
Sure. You may all recall this is a project that actually started in 2020 after a condition assessment recommended the replacement of Lift Station E. Subsequent to that, staff went through a site selection analysis that took into account a number of parameters to identify the ideal location for a replacement lift station, and ultimately requested the Sewer Utility District Commission approval and authorization to enter into negotiations with property owners, either for easements or acquisition of property in association with that site selection process. Unfortunately, at the time, we were ultimately unsuccessful in negotiating either, and therefore requested the designation of some right-of-way at the end of Laguna Drive as the location for the construction of the lift station. That was ultimately authorized, and subsequent to that, there was a design contract for the lift station itself. In March of this year, staff became aware of the availability of one of the higher priority parcels that was a residential home that had come for sale. You may then recall subsequent to that, the Common Council authorized the purchase of that property, and we have since closed on that sale. Today, the discussion is surrounding the designation of that site as the location for the reconstructed or the new lift station, and then ultimately the decommissioning of the existing lift station. And we are requesting the designation of that at 2010 Ranch Road for, among other reasons listed, an infrastructure cost savings of almost $1.2 million, as well as minimizing the infrastructure impact given its proximity to the existing lift station, and the other reasons that were otherwise listed in your packet.
Thank you. Any questions from the Sewer Commission or comments they'd like to make? We've got anticipate a large number of people here paying attention to this item. We usually don't take public comment until the Common Council meeting, but usually the way we vote at the Sewer Utility District Commission is just echoed at the council. So I may break form here and just take public comment early. You've already been waiting a full hour longer than you anticipated because of other meetings going over. But let's get a couple questions out from the commission, and then I think I'm just going to dive into this pile of requests to speak. Commissioner Bach.
Could you please just kind of go over, what the kind of the lift station, the current, issues to neighbors? There was things in the reports about smells and all those things, and how, what will happen with the new station and anticipated, and any kind of issues you've gone over with the neighbors regarding those kinds of lift station issues.
The existing lift station was constructed in the 1960s, so both from a technology standpoint and an operation standpoint is well beyond its life cycle. So I would argue that nearly all components, whether that's related to odor reduction, electricity, energy efficiency, pumps, sizing, everything, are outdated and undersized. That's what the condition assessment otherwise indicated and warranted the construction of a new lift station. The new lift station would be constructed to modern standards, so would be more energy efficient, would have better odor control, and otherwise be quieter. It will be bigger, but otherwise operate differently than that was built in the 1960s.
I think it's fair to point out, too, that some of us weren't here when we discussed some of the details, but this new site will also have redundant power feeds, so in the event of a power outage, it is less likely to be impacted because it'll have a feed from two different substations, which is one of the annoyances now, is that when it loses power, it can't pump sewage, obviously, and we need to discharge. This lift station also causes a bunch of people's basements to fill with sewage upstream of it, which is also why we're doing this. This is definitely priority number one in the sewer utility now that we've gotten the East Trunk Sewer project in the ground. This is the next most important thing to reduce people's basements backing up with sewage. Any other comments or questions for staff? If not, we've got a bunch of these. I'll read them off. I'll read off the people who chose not to speak first. Michael Levin, 2041 West Ranch Road, opposes, does not wish to speak. Bill Limke, 2042 West Ranch Road, opposes, does not wish to speak. Brian Birch, 1930 West Riverbend Court, opposes, does not wish to speak. Kathy Lorenz, 11707 North Hillside Lane, opposes, does not wish to speak. Dixie Lowen, 2028 West Ranch Road, opposes, does not wish to speak. Howard Schleil, 1935 West Riverbend Court, opposes and wishes to speak. So please approach the microphone, and all comments are limited to 5 minutes so we can make sure to get everyone through here.
5 minutes is not a lot of time when you're talking about something that's going to be permanent in our neighborhood. So I may run a minute or two over. I hope you'll be okay with that. My name is Howard Schley. I live at 1935 West Riverbend Court. The Riverbend Homes Association. It was one of our 11 homes that you purchased. We did have a covenant with the city that said that no home in our association can be used for any purpose other than single-family residence. I was told by the city attorney that you can fix that. So apparently that's a factor here. But the existing lift station has been in place for over 60 years, and as neighbors, we do not dispute that the station needs upgrading. We do not dispute that the city engineers will do a superb job and that it will be an engineering marvel. We also do not dispute that the project has already been approved at the Laguna location, that the project is feasible at the Laguna location. And we acknowledge that the Laguna location, as city staff has mentioned, will cost a little bit more and it adds some complexity. Nevertheless, I want to reiterate, this is a permanent thing that we're going to be building. As your packet points out, the city had informational meetings with the neighbors. The neighborhood overwhelmingly indicated a preference for the Laguna site, and that was approved in October of 2022. Suddenly, the Maloney family sold their house to the city, and here we are. Now, the packet suggests to you there are some benefits. This is where we do have a dispute. One of the benefits they cite is cost savings. I'll come back to that. One of the benefits they cite is that the same neighbors will be adjacent properties to the that are adjacent to the existing lift station will be adjacent to the new station, minimizing the impact. No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to say that, well, these people have lived with this thing all along, so they don't count. This is a new station, so we're going to talk about a clean slate here, and everybody gets to have a say. Now, if you build it, I don't know which one he's got here. If you build it on the one on your left, your right, at Laguna, it directly impacts 3 homes with 2 more adjacent. If you build it on Ranch Road, which is what this resolution is for, there are 12 homes that are in close proximity. Those circles are the same exact diameter. We are the 12 homes. We are the ones who, and me personally, for 35 years have lived next to this station. And no, we don't get to get written off just because we have put up with the smell and the noise and the trucks and the raw sewage being dumped into our HMA pond for decades. Now, I didn't intend to get riled up tonight, but I read something today from city staff that I didn't care to read. Quote, existing residents impacted by the existing lift station E may be closer in proximity to the lift station if it's constructed at Ranch Road. By closer, I mean closer than if it's built at Laguna. But those residents are already impacted by the existing location. We're somehow tainted because we've already lived next to it. We are lesser citizens because of that. I think that comment was outrageous, but there's more. Staff went on to suggest that the Laguna site is less viable because the residents at the end of Ranch and Laguna who moved in or built next to the bike path extensions did not expect further infrastructure or development. I don't know how many of you know me, but for the past several decades, I have been in and out of this chamber with hundreds of my fellow citizens begging you not to let construction take place at the end of Ranch and Laguna. We lost that fight the last time around, and they're building 5 houses there. But to say that those new houses didn't expect to have something built at the end of Laguna and minimize the rest of us who are going to be in much closer proximity is rather outrageous. You also gone on to say that the station will be outside of the current bike path, and construction of the Ranch Road station will not disturb or interrupt the bike path's use during construction. Seriously? A few bike riders being inconvenienced outweigh an entire neighborhood who have to live with this thing forever? If you're riding your bike for exercise, I would suggest that making a longer route during construction is kind of doing you a favor. Building the lift station at Ranch Road, according to your packet, eliminates the need for closing West Ranch Road for construction of the connecting sewer. Road construction is a fact of life in Wisconsin. Avoiding a temporary inconvenience does not justify forcing this neighborhood to live with the Maloney sewer station forever. And the final point, again, is rather upsetting to me. If you build it on Ranch Road, it's less disruption to the residents in the area. Which residents are you talking about? The 12 that are in close proximity, or the 5 at Laguna? Now, there's more about that Laguna site that you'll be hearing from my neighbor, Kirk Anderson, and the proximity of the homes in that area. But I can tell you, if you look at that map, and that's from Google, the location of the homes in proximity to the Laguna site are all farther away than the location of the homes at the ranch site. I don't want to steal Kirk's thunder, but he's going to tell you about some distances that he measured on that. If you build this thing in the center of our neighborhood, it's permanent. It's there this year, next year, 5 years, 10 years, 60 years, 100 years if you build it right. So,
Sir, we're at 7 minutes, so
Well,
please wrap it up.
does anybody want to give up their time for me? Okay. I want to talk about the cost savings. You've been told you can save $1 million. Are we going to hold a parade every year for the next century to remind people that we saved $1 million in 2024 and yet built this station in the center of these 12 homes? Because the building of the station is permanent. Now, I know $1 million is not something to sneeze at, but on this project, that's 10% discount. Building it on Ranch Road to save money gives you a 10% discount. On a budget that has a contingency allowance of almost double that. If you look at the budget numbers that I've seen, the total of the contingency line items for the Laguna project comes to over $2.1 million, more than covering the cost difference. And that doesn't include the tax revenue that you're going to lose by tearing down the Maloney house. That's a house in our neighborhood. And over time, that house generates tax revenue. If this station lasts 60 years, the $4,500 a year from that house is about a quarter of what you're talking about saving. For 7 of the 8 of you, this isn't your neighborhood, so you're probably thinking that your obligation is to save your constituents a few bucks. It's very few bucks. Because there are 10,174 paying properties in Mequon, according to the 2020 draft report that I saw online. If your vote tonight is to save those constituents money, you will be saving them $11.70 a year over a 10-year period by building at the Maloney site. Now, if you add it up in 10 years, you can buy a nice dinner at the Chio with a nice piece of cheesecake for dessert. I want to read something to you, and I didn't introduce myself, but I served on the original Mequon Visioning Committee in the 1990s. And we gave a lot of thought, I don't know if any of you have ever seen that report, but we gave a lot of thought to the future of Mequon. I see now that there's a comprehensive 2035 plan that's been adopted by this council. So I'm going to read your own words to you. Mequon is a city rich in rural heritage and natural beauty. It offers a government that advocates for its community members. That would be those of us who live in close proximity to that station. It promotes civic participation, which is what we're doing here tonight, and enjoys healthy economic base. In Mequon, our community protects the natural environment and values the high-quality neighborhoods. Safe community, public gathering spaces, strong education, medical facilities, all of which create an exceptional quality of life. Quality of life should not be sacrificed because someone riding a bike will be temporarily inconvenienced.
Okay, sir, we're at 10.5 minutes.
Anybody else?
Uh,
I'm almost done.
who's
Gonna
yep,
be here forever.
Yep.
So I'll be done in a minute. Quality of life should not be sacrificed because of a few engineering challenges. Quality of life should not be sacrificed for a 10% discount. Now I'm asking you to affirm the Laguna site that you already approved. It is feasible. The Laguna plan was approved. The Laguna plan is feasible. The Laguna site is more remote and easier to shield. And the neighborhood wants the Laguna plan. We have from the start. And any vote to the contrary is a vote against our quality of life. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kirk Anderson, 1928 West Ranch Road, opposes and wishes to speak.
Good evening. My name is Kirk Anderson with my wife Jane, handing out some.
Could you,
Some
get a little
photos.
closer to the mic?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. And our family home is located 1928 West Ranch Road, which is directly east of the Maloney house. Just a real quick background of us. Both of our parents, built here in the 60s. We were both born and raised here. School at Trinity Freistadt, Lumen Christi, Homestead, Concordia College. After Jay and I attended college, we both moved back. We're married and extremely blessed and excited to find our current home, our log home, which is just a few miles from where we both grew up. When we moved here in 1999, very excited to be, part of this neighborhood, especially the Small Home Association, which includes many acres of gorgeous land, a pond, and most importantly, amazing group of neighbors. We spent 20 years plus restoring and remodeling our 1800s log home for our family. We have two children who are adults now who have attended our same schools. Over the years, we have, like I said, had pleasure of such wonderful neighbors, and many over the years, becoming actually close friends. So, as some of you are aware, the downfalls of these horrible situations dealing with the current lift station over decades. Situated, in the heart of our home lots. The noise, the stench, the city trucks entering and leaving at all times of the day and night. Of course, we were all happy to hear that there was, an approved Laguna site for the new station, which would relieve all of this. So you can imagine, well, you can't imagine, none of you can imagine the thoughts and the stress and emotions that all of us, have had since we've been aware of this possibility of this new lift station taking the place of the Maloney home. Again, when this association was developed, the city agreed and was printed in black and white that these lots were intended for single-family homes only. The pre-approved Laguna site for the new lift station obviously is in a much more secluded area with little to no effect on family homes and family life. So the city jumps on the purchase of the Maloney home to save the city some money, which, seems that the only concern of the city is to save money instead of taking into consideration the overall concerns and quality of life of the citizens of this neighborhood. Like Howard had said, the amount of money seems like a lot, but again, after a few years, after 5 years, that money would be collected, absorbed, and forgotten about. However, the permanent structure will be here forever. to construct this new station at the Maloney House, you'd be leveling a beautiful property tax-paying home, leveling 50-plus-year-old trees that aren't replaceable with a few sticks and arborvitaes. So my wife Jane had handed out those pictures, 1, 2, and 3. And as you look at picture number 1, that's the site for the approved Laguna lift station. And this photo is taken facing east. So you see, with the abundance of trees and foliage, you can't even see the next closest house, which is approximately 80-plus yards away. As you look at picture number 2, this is the site for the approved Laguna lift station. This photo is taken facing north. With the abundance of trees and foliage, you can't see the next closest house, which again is approximately 80-plus yards away. Now looking at picture number 3, that is taken from my lot line, which is approximately 30 feet from my driveway. And as looking at the Maloney house, it's only 17 yards away. So my question is, who in their right mind is going to level this perfectly beautiful property tax-paying home and put a lift station there at this location, especially when these lots were deemed to be single-family lots? So I'm assuming that not one of you, perhaps none of you, have actually come out to see this site. Put your feet on the ground and look around. As you're standing looking at the Maloney house, you look to the west and you see the Lowen home right there. And to the south, the Vincent home right there. To the east, my home right there. To the north, the Schley home right there. So I want to make it clear, I'm here on behalf of all the neighbors, and I mean all of the neighbors, especially those of us who are pushing this lift station right in our faces, especially my home, which you're pushing right under our noses. If you haven't been to the Maloney home and haven't actually seen the very extreme close proximity to all of our homes, I would invite you to visit. I'm actually begging you to do so before you make this life-changing decision for us. So again, wanting to save money, putting the station there will only decrease the resale values of our homes. If this is only about money, this shows the city's true colors shining through, and I would suggest adjusting your mission statement for the city of Mequon. So a recap, there is a pre-approved site. And I say, do the right thing, put the station where it won't be seen or heard at the current approved Laguna location. Please put the citizens first and foremost over the savings. Do the right thing. Think of the quality of life for the citizens over the money. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Next, we have Barbara Levin, 2041 West Ranch Road, opposes and wishes to speak. Okay. Your 5 minutes went to first speaker. Got it. Next, Rebecca Barsh, 1930 West Riverbend Court, opposes and wishes to speak.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Barsh, and my husband and I, a couple of years ago, bought a home on Riverbend Court, and we are part of the homeowners association with the 12 homes that you saw in the picture. We bought it because there is a beautiful pond there, and it's an incredibly natural setting, even though it's just a few minutes from Port Washington Road and I-43. It's almost like being in the country, but being close and near to everything. It's a wonderful little neighborhood. And we walk it all the time and appreciate it. I think what I wanted to focus on is the fact that, you know, the only eyesore we have in our neighborhood right now is the lift station. And now the proposal is to replace a home that looks, you know, like it's part of the residential neighborhood with an even bigger lift station. And what we haven't talked about tonight is how much bigger is this intended to be. And my understanding is that it's a significant size difference. I also worry about the noise, and I know that city staff mentioned it would be quieter, but I guess I'm questioning how much work has actually been done to determine that. And what you can't change are the trucks coming and going and the noise from that. Also, the dumping sewage into the pond is not the the best solution and smells after it happens. So, yeah, I guess have all been staying tuned to this, and I'm just one of those neighbors who was thrilled that the Laguna Beach site was found that had a very small impact. And I'm asking for consideration that the council go back to that original approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Jeannie Vincent, 2005 West Ranch Road, opposes and wishes to speak.
Hello. So yes, I'm Jean Vincent. I live at 2005 Ranch Road, which is directly across the street from the Maloney property. Bear with me because these guys did a great job of explaining our, our concerns. So you're probably going to hear the same thing from me a little bit. You also may have received my email, which detailed my concerns. I did have an email conversation today with the Director of Public Works who responded to some of my concerns. I was left dismayed by a few of those responses. The first statement was to the effect that those of us who live near the Ranch Road site had already been living near the lift station, and therefore this project would have less of an impact on us than those who live near the Laguna site. I don't see the correlation. This is an entirely new project, should be thought of as such. The current lift station is small. It's set back from the road, and it's blocked by the house that would be demolished. You probably wouldn't realize it's there unless you were looking closely. If the home were to be demolished, there's no camouflaging or hiding. The new building will be as large, if not larger, than that existing house. The second statement was that there were residents who built or moved into homes at the Laguna site were not expecting any further infrastructure or development. As Howard kind of left us, that's outrageous. Are those of us who live near the 2010 Ranch Road, are we expected to have thought that there would be further infrastructure? The facts are that the property at 2010 Ranch Road is part of the HOA with a clause in the agreement that only single-family homes were to be constructed. The mayor at that time signed that agreement. It's perplexing to me that the city was able to overlook this clause and move forward with purchasing the house, knowing that they would be constructing something far different. If anyone were not to be expecting further infrastructure, it would be those of us who are part of or surround the HOA properties. I won't go further into the areas that others have already spoke about, except to say that the cost saving should not be the only consideration here. Both sites have their challenges, but to demolish a single-family home in the middle of a single-family street in a single-family neighborhood, to construct a large infrastructure that, quite frankly, no one wants to look at or think about, when there's an approved site that is set back from the street and surrounded mostly by undeveloped land, it doesn't make sense. We need to preserve our neighborhoods for what they are, quiet places to live, work, and raise our children. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last registered speaker we have. Is there anyone on this? Are you speaking on this item, sir? Okay. There'll be time for you later where you don't jump around items. We're all on this item still, so you'll have to be patient and wait a little bit. Questions, comments from the commissioners? Or a motion?
Kristen,
Commissioner
can you
Tlaco.
just, what exactly is the size difference going to be on the lift station?
Unfortunately, I don't have a comparison to the existing station, although I might be able to get there. But we do anticipate it would have, no matter where it is located, it would have a similar footprint to the first floor of the existing home. I'm going to see if I can get I don't think the drawing I have is scalable.
So about the same size and footprint, but not 2 stories.
Correct.
How big
And-
is, how
Oh.
big is the lot?
The lot is 0.64 acres.
Commissioner Bach.
What about landscaping plans or shielding that? I mean, has anybody talked about that?
Yes, we have, and again, regardless of the location, we would do all of the above. At the Laguna Drive location, we'd have to remove an amount of the existing foliage to be able to build it, and then we'd otherwise screen it. If it was at 2010 Ranch Road, we would attempt to keep as much as we can, especially that facing the street, and work within the footprint of where the house is now.
Commissioner Chalaco.
My last question is, with the 2010 Ranch Road site, how much more, as far as future growth, development, sustainability, and like not having backups, does that location bring us versus the Laguna Drive lift station?
With respect to that, they should be similar. There's not necessarily a size difference to the lift station itself. I will just note, as the mayor did, this is just the next in a series of improvements, because there are actually multiple lift stations that discharge into lift station E. But it's the next improvement that needs to be done to achieve any reduction in either sewer service overflows or basement backups, both of which should be improved at either location.
Commissioner Bach.
Last question. Some of the residents talked about trucks and, sewage into the ponds and all that kind of stuff. How often does that kind of stuff happen, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Let's maybe not focus on how often it does now, because that is not anything that we wish to continue or otherwise replicate. So at the new station, both the trucking and the SSOs or basement backups, either way, should be reduced. I would not venture to say we would ever eliminate them, because there can always be a storm event that oversees any design. But given what we've done with the East Trunk Sewer Project and the number of basement backups that we've been able to successfully eliminate in that, we anticipate that either location would address that. Certainly the goal would be for the station to be built at the capacity that discharging or putting sewer service overflow into the pond would no longer be required. As it relates to the trucks, there is a little bit of a difference in the two locations. No matter what, we check lift stations weekly. That's our operation and maintenance, to otherwise be sure that they continue to operate. That's during normal business hours. Both of them would have the dual feed of the backup power, so the need for generators that we otherwise bring during power outages should be reduced, if not all but eliminated, by that process. The Laguna Drive location would still require the construction of a tank for water, so we would still have to come to fill that. That only happens about once every other month. That trucking wouldn't be required if we can otherwise utilize the well at 2010 Ranch Road.
Commissioner Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everyone for taking time out of your busy evening for such a hard topic. I know this has probably been on your minds for years, so thank you for being here. This is probably going to be one of the hardest decisions I've had to vote on as I reflect on my 5 years of tenure here, and unfortunately I have 2 District 6 neighborhoods that are affected, and neither neighborhood's going to be better off, right? So if this was in my neighborhood, if this was being proposed right next to me, I would feel the same way as you. But we're the policymakers up here, and that's why we're elected by the 25,000 residents to make hard decisions. So I'm trying to navigate everything that you've been saying and the hard decision in front of us. And I do agree it should not only be about money. We just had our strategic planning session, and we learned about the city finances, and we learned about the upcoming $8 million pool. And who knows how expensive all the new public safety facilities will be. So I just want the public to understand that the council is looking at some long-term expenditures and looking for savings, and I get how it must feel that perhaps you're feeling like it's at the expense of your neighborhood. I'm rewriting my speech as I go here, so that's why I'm talking a little slower. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote, so I'm actually talking this through with you and try to help you understand how challenging this is for me, and I'm sure my colleagues. The Laguna location is over 1,000 feet away, and so when I'm trying to compare the two, I am thinking about the disruption to the environment and running pipe across multiple properties and disrupting a lot of homes. Possible negotiation of easement rights associated with that. So I don't think the Laguna location is as easy as it sounds. It's a complicated project in and of itself. They're both complicated projects. They're both going to cost roughly $10 million. So, you know, putting in terms of 10% savings, that was an interesting way of looking at it, but it is such a largely massive project. In hindsight, I wish the acquisition process could have been handled more sensitively with the neighbors, but the negotiations with the seller were just so quick and truly did not allow for this. There was nothing council could have done differently other than not purchase the property or request an amendment from the seller, which seemed unlikely at the time. So here we are. I acknowledge that the benefits of, on paper, the Ranch Road location may seem to outweigh the negatives, and I agree that the negatives like smell, sound, and appearance will be mitigated through exceptional design and state-of-the-art technology at either location to preserve the character of either neighborhood. I agree, we shouldn't have used the whole analogy, you know, the lift station is nearby now, and so it's those neighbors might not, they're already affected. I don't subscribe to that either, for what it's worth. I think maybe we're just trying to throw all the reasons we can to justify it. I don't think that's a good reason at all. Either way, I do believe that the HOA needs to be made whole for the loss of the HOA dues and for any upcoming negotiation of easements that will be required moving forward. The council should know that those costs are not factored into tonight's analysis, so that $1.2 million gap will shrink. Who knows by how much, but it's probably not enough to make up the gap, I would admit. I would think that if any of those economics or other factors would change, I would think that my fellow common council members would rethink their decision in the future, but right now, for this vote tonight, I do recognize that the economics are overbearing on my council's head. But what you said really did speak to me, and it's probably what I've been struggling with. This whole radius around houses concept originated when Mr. Schley and Mr. Anderson and I sat down with staff, and you know, money is one thing, but you know, how many people does it affect? And it's hard to say, oh, there's 5 people here and 12 there. I mean, you're all just as important as the other. So I mean, we can't go by numbers. The more I think about it, we can't choose 12 over 5. I mean, you're all affected. When I look at the map, it is right in the middle of the residential neighborhood. What they're saying is true. It would be way better for this to be at the end of a subdivision, at a dead end. So here I am. I could go either way. I'm struggling. I want to support my residents. I've heard you. This is a hard decision for everyone up here. And I just want to assure you that regardless of what way it goes, no expense will be spared to try to make this right moving forward and to try to mitigate the impact on your lives, because all your points are valid. And so anything we can do, if we go this route, I think should be done. We should spare no expense. If you don't want to see it, you won't see it. If you want it to look like a beautiful house, it will look like a beautiful house. But that's the type of discussion that the neighborhood needs to have with the city, and we haven't had that yet. So first we have to make up our minds, and I guess if there's any other comments, I'm getting ready to make my vote. I'm not going to be making a motion either way, and I'll be listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Parrish. Any other commissioners have any input into any of the concerns brought forward or the staff report, or perhaps a motion one way or the other? We'll be here an awful long time if we don't if you don't make a motion.
Question, if I could, please. How much time has been spent trying to work together to try to find out if there is a way to bridge the gap where this property would work with certain conditions, right? As Alderman Parrish said, it's not going to be an easy decision either way, but have we really looked at it and says, okay, we hear your concerns, but is there anything that we, the city, can do to help alleviate some of those concerns? Because at the end of the day, I think we all agree that this project needs to move forward. It's the best thing for the community. It's what the location is, and whether it be the appearance or whatever the concerns are, right? There's going to be a structure next to you either way. Is there a way for us to make this structure on this property in a way that would be appeasing to the neighborhood, to a point where we could create a win-win situation and work together in something that's a difficult situation and make it something that's a little bit more favorable for everybody, where everybody's got to give a little bit more. So my question is, have we had those discussions where we've really sat together and educated each other on the true concerns versus just saying no, 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 and really talking about how we might be able to get to a yes?
On behalf of staff, there hasn't been any no. There's not been any requests related to screening, architecture, anything that has been no. But I think either location is going to have those conversations with either set of impacted residents. Everyone is going to want to ensure that it is the highest and best use of the property that is otherwise available, and we would give equal weight to either of those locations as it relates to all of that. In fact, before this property became available, we were otherwise preparing to get at the point in design where we could meet out and stake out the location of the lift station so that we could have everybody stand in their yards and look at it from where they were and talk about where we either needed to plant trees or how we needed to, orient certain things or where we may otherwise be when this opportunity came up. If the location was ultimately selected for 2010 West Ranch Road, we would do the exact same thing. We'd need a little bit more time to vet through the location, but we would have otherwise done the same thing, is stake it in the field, meet with everybody out there, have the discussions about what their requests may be, what screening they may look for, and all of those elements. We would do those in both locations.
I want to just play off that for a minute because I want to make sure this is clear as far as how I'm thinking about it. And I'm in District 8. I happen to live in a neighborhood with 37 residents. And at the front of our driveway is a lift station. Literally, I come in and see it every day, and I leave every day and I see it. And I would say this, that every time we've had an issue, the city has been very accommodating and trying to work through that, right? It's one of those things that's a necessity in this community for us to live here and for everybody to go ahead and be able to appreciate the same amenities, if you will. And so they've been very accommodating with that. I want to, again, on behalf of the staff, this isn't a decision that anybody's taking lightly or that anybody's trying to go ahead and skirt around the issues. We really want to work with the community to figure out how we can get something that everybody needs in a place that maybe nobody wants, right? And that's not easy for any of us. And from where we sit here from a fiduciary standpoint, certainly we have to be thinking about the community as a whole. And I know you say it's not about cost, but there are some advantages for this site. And we have to take those into considerations as well as we make this decision.
Thank you, Commissioner Gebhardt. Does anyone else have anything to add or perhaps make a motion? Well, sir, this isn't really public comment is over. This really isn't a dialogue at this point.
But you asked a question about whether there's been public interaction. I can answer that. If you want to answer.
This is a highly unusual way to run a meeting, I think. I'll ask staff, since this is normal, have we met with residents and talked about screening and what the building may look like?
After the purchase of the property, 2 residents reached out and we did meet with them. We didn't get to that level of detail aside from the mutual understanding that all of those were things that would be addressed during design.
Okay. I think that's the answer. Yeah. Well, come on back up to the podium. No, come on back up to the podium. If I'm going to entertain this, we'll at least do it properly.
I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but there was a 1.5-year process where city did reach out to us. And we had multiple meetings. There were informational meetings here in the city council chamber with different ideas. We met with Kevin Driscoll multiple times, talked with him about the issues, talked with him about the screenings and the inadequacies of screenings. And that's how the Laguna location was arrived at. Because screening that location is a whole lot more viable than screening where it's crammed in with the 12 houses. So the interaction you're asking about did take place on that level. And this Laguna's project would have gone through. You all approved it. Except one day, a neighbor put up a for sale sign. And that's when the city jumped on that.
Well, those did occur. This is a 3-year-old process. Please sit. At that same time, we also consulted people if they'd be willing to sell their property. This is nothing new, trying to acquire a single-family residence in the area. The concept is as old as the project. That's the part that was left out of that. So yeah, we've been talking for a long time, and this site, as well as other sites, were also potential sites at that time. We just couldn't acquire one. And we weren't going to compel someone to give it to us by forcible means. We obtained it on a fair market. Opportunity knocked, and the knock was answered. So that's the other half of the story.
Mayor, just a quick follow-up question. So we're voting today on whether or not we want to move forward with this site, and then the process after that would be what?
Well, the process after that is actual site design. We have the design of the lift station. It just gets picked up from here and moved there. But none of the details of how to integrate it with the rest of the site have occurred because we haven't made this decision yet. Did I get that right? Or
Yes,
okay.
I was just going to say those public meetings that otherwise took place with respect to the Laguna Drive location would subsequently take place for the Ranch Road location. The mechanics of the lift station will remain mostly unchanged. It will be the architecture, the screening, those things that would be impacted by those discussions.
Thank you.
And just for my clarification too, Kristen, the lift stations in Mequon, are they all different sizes depending on the location? Is that how that works?
Yes.
I think we still need a motion. We're happy to entertain more comments or questions about the process.
I move to Resolution 4125 for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would just add, if we could, Alderman Gebhardt my neighbor next to me, they both talked about design. So if we can include that in there somehow to make sure that we are going to do everything possible to make this,
I think no matter what site, that's our commitment. I mean, if you drive around Mequon, we have the nicest looking lift stations. There's one on Donjas Bay I drive by every day. It looks like a small house. It even has cedar shake roofs in concert with the 2 subdivisions that it serves.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that's a friendly amendment, but Alderman Parrish and Alderman Gebhardt both made those comments, and if that's implied, that's great that, we can.
I'm happy to write it down because we're going to do it anyway. If someone would like to add that. Did the motioner and seconder agree that that is a friendly amendment we're going to add to the motion? I assume yes, but I can't speak for the motioner and the seconder.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And okay with the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. Have to make that clarification. Administrator Jones.
Mayor, I may just opine that in terms of specificity, that's a little loose, and I say that with all due respect. Maybe the better way is to direct staff and the consultant as we move through the design process to bring that back here to the council for presentation and follow-up. And Director Lundin, forgive me if you covered this earlier in your presentation, but this is just yet another step in this process towards constructing the necessary lift station E. Design will go forward. We will bring design back to the council to get feedback. And then we will put together construction documents. We will bid the project out, and then we will have to award a contract for actual construction of the lift station. So there are going to be many other iterations or steps, if you will, that'll be coming before the Sewer Utility District Commission as part of this larger project, and maybe directing staff to bring back the design as we move through with the neighbors and the consultant gives you that check or that comfort level that we're meeting the needs and hearing and addressing those sensitivities. Thank you.
I will only note, I checked with community development earlier today, and the maybe design conversation is twofold. Obviously, there's my portion of the design, right? The engineering, the pumps, the things like that, that I'm not sure anyone is concerned about, actually, in the context of this conversation. But the design would typically go through Planning Commission. It doesn't mean we can't duplicate efforts here, but Planning Commission would typically be the body that would otherwise review said architecture, of course, after we go through the public process. Not that I'm not willing to duplicate it and bring it here if that's what's requested, but Planning Commission is the body that would typically review that architecture.
So that's
Thank you.
statutorily who would review it. We can create the secondary requirement to present it here. Okay, I think that's the more verbose version of what everyone meant by that motion. So thank you for that. Yeah, we'll include input from the neighbors and have it come back before this body.
Okay.
Certainly. Okay, with that amendment clarified, appreciate that because it's better to be more specific. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or input? Hearing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Tlaco? Aye. Commissioner Meyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher?
Aye.
Commissioner Bach?
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish?
No.
Commissioner Brad?
Aye.
Commissioner Gebhardt?
Aye.
Commissioner Nurpin?
Aye. That resolution carries on to the council. Is there a motion to adjourn the Sewer Utility District Commission meeting?
Move
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
All right, moving on to our council meeting. Well, does anyone want to adjourn? Say yes if you do.
Aye.
No if you don't. Okay, we're adjourned now, thank you. Just assume it's implied at some time. We will now call the common council meeting to order and do the Pledge of Allegiance. It's been a while since we've done a roll call. Let's do it again.
Alderman Strelchuk is absent. Alderman Talaco.
Here.
Alderman Meyer.
Here.
Alderman Hancher.
Here.
Alderman Bach.
Here.
Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderman Bratt.
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Here.
Mayor Nurbin.
Here. First up, we have a couple of public hearings. First is ordinance 2024-1661, an ordinance amending Chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code in connection with clarifying certain definitions, design standards, and location standards for residential development within the city's town center and arrival corridor zoning districts. This was recommended by Planning Commission March 18th. Further recommendation from the Committee of the Whole this evening. First reading at Common Council last month on April 9th. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in public hearing. Is there anyone here tonight who wishes to speak on this item? Hearing and seeing none, is there a motion to close public hearing?
Move to close.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor of closing public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are back. We will take action on this item at this time. Is there a motion? Or any further discussion? We just discussed it at Committee of the Whole, so I'm anticipating not much.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, questions? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Talaco.
Aye.
Alderman Meyer.
No.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Bach.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Bratt.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
And that ordinance carries. The second ordinance is 2024-1662, an ordinance repealing and recreating Article 6 within the Mequon Chapter 58 Municipal Code as it relates to floodplain zoning. This is recommended by Planning Commission March 18th, and further recommendations coming from Public Welfare this evening.
Public welfare approved.
And first reading was at last month at April's Common Council meeting. Is there a motion to go into public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of going into public hearing, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, we are now in public hearing. We have at least one person here who wishes to speak. Nancy Talaco, 12644 North Shoreland. Agenda item is the flood maps. Poses and wishes to speak.
I do. Hello. First, I want to thank you, the Common Council. I have discovered there's a lot you do with regard to city government, and I very much appreciate all of your efforts to represent Mequon residents. I know it's pretty tough. That said, I greatly appreciate the attention given to the new flood maps. It would be much easier to simply approve them with no further thought, but that would be just kicking the can down the road. I have lived in the floodway for 40 years. During that time, FEMA flood insurance has risen from approximately $300 a year to over $3,000 a year. My home, built in the 1930s, does not have a basement and is elevated, but below the current base flood elevation. In a flood event, the surrounding area does flood, but we have never had water in the house. The new flood maps increased the base flood elevation 14 inches in my area, which in a flood event would put my main floor under water. If my home has not flooded in the last 40 years at the current base flood elevation, it doesn't seem accurate that the water level would ever get to be 14 inches higher. In addition, some homes that are considered flood fringe or have letter of map amendments, LOMAs, and other parts of Mequon will be adversely affected by these new maps. With all of the claims in the last several years nationwide, FEMA insurance has taken a big hit. These new maps will undoubtedly generate increased insurance premiums. I question the process by which these new maps were created and their accuracy. I believe it is the duty of the city to investigate and challenge the maps if necessary. Mequon needs to stand up for its residents and fight to keep every inch of the land that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight who wishes to speak on this topic? Hearing and seeing no takers on that. Is there a motion to close public hearing? Motion and a second to close public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are back, and we will take up that item. I'll just lead by responding. I'm upset at the way the process works too. FEMA and DNR drop these on your lap and give you precious little time to respond to them. The process sucks. I too question the accuracy of the maps, especially as we found out in planning staff's conversation with FEMA and DNR that they're using a flood flow more than 2 times what has ever been observed at the U.S. Geological Services monitoring station on the north end of the study area at where Cedarburg dumps into Mequon. That's why today I signed a series of letters to state and federal officials imploring them to have them correct that modeling error in their process. We could go through the details of the whole model and the elevations and water absorption, but none of that matters because they're using a flood flow rate 2 times what's ever been observed, 2.05 times as a matter of fact. If the government wants people to trust in science and engineering, they better use the right data. Unfortunately, we have to approve this, even as flawed as it is, by July. Actually sooner because it has to get approved by FEMA. We have to have it done sometime in June, or our residents lose flood insurance, and that's simply unacceptable position to put those residents in. So I'd say we're moving forward under duress is probably the best characterization of where we're at. At least I do intend to challenge our state and elected officials to have them do the right thing with the modeling. There might be other avenues we can pursue, but at least forcing them to run their existing model, hopefully forcing them to run their existing models with the right flow rate would be a good first step. I don't know where that request will go. The letters are just going out today, but that is in process. I'm happy to open it up for other comment. I'm sure there'll be a few comments before we take action on this item. So open it up for everyone else. Alderwoman Talaco.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I am very happy with the way that city staff has been working so diligently to find these issues and to continue to try and give back as much of the land back to our residents. I am pretty excited about some of the adoptions that we're making in this Article 9 as far as giving back residents in the non-conforming buildings, their properties back to them. Tonight, I do ask, or will make a motion to postpone until the following next Common Council meeting in June, which would still give us enough time to adopt them and to allow us to have the open house in order to give the residents a chance to look through it, to be a part of the process, in order to move forward with this. The second motion would still be, my second motion would be to separate it as far as when we approve the resolution of the maps versus the ordinance as well. Meaning that the maps are inaccurate. We found errors.
I agree with you in principle, but in practice, both have to be adopted on the same time frame. We can't approve one and not the other, or the end result is the same, unfortunately.
Well, I'd like to put forth the first motion I'd like to try and make is to postpone until the next meeting of this.
Okay, let's take other input before we entertain any motion that resembles tabling. Is there any other input from the council? Alderman Bratt.
Yeah, so I appreciate the residents standing up and speaking to us. And, you know, I think that's what we have here tonight, as you saw with the last discussion we had, communication. And I really wish, I know staff has tried to get DNR to participate in this open house on the 29th. And, we all have our errors and follies, but having that communication, just being there, being part of that discussion, I think would go a long way to help addressing some of our residents' concerns. I have a number of impacted residents in District 7 as well. So all I ask is for other level of government to communicate with us and our residents. Thank you.
Any other input from any of the elected officials? Alderman Parrish.
I like the idea of delaying it. I mean, ultimately we will approve it, but as far as the optics or the timing, maybe we'll come up with some great new information at the open house. Either way, as long as we're not jeopardizing the July vote, I don't see any reason not to delay it. Furthermore, I would just add that public welfare did discuss this, and staff is starting. They have some really interesting, complicated ways of attacking the data and the maps, and so they don't just want to go challenge the whole ruling, right? All the maps. Like, we want to pinpoint exactly what we are contesting, and then hire a consultant for those areas. And so right now we don't even have a sense of the scope, but I guess that would be one message I'd continue to want to say to residents is that we'll keep spending time and money on this even after July, because we can't slow it down. But I'd like to do a protest tabling, tonight, just to give it to them, and an easy decision, and maybe some new information will come out at the open house. Thank you.
Alderman Gebhardt.
I'm just a little confused and need some clarity here. So the thought is that we just want to kick it out a month to make the same decision that we're going to make today?
My thought is not to rush approval of it until after we have the open house, that residents have had a chance to read through it, to read the new things that we've put in it, such as the new act that we've incorporated into it, just to give it a little bit more. I feel like the more minds that we have that work on an issue, the easier it is to come to results, because everyone can kind of think in their own box or their own way. And if we can incorporate all that, we might have a better plan as far as how we should put a motion forth in order to challenge the maps and what areas of most concern we should be challenging at that time. I'm afraid that if we pass it by right now, it kind of is check mark done and we kind of forget about it. So I'd like it still to be in the forefront of our minds next month.
There's theoretically no harm in waiting, but there's little to be gained at the same time. We aren't going to forget about it and push it off to the side. We're still under a deadline to get it. We have to approve it in June so it can get back to FEMA in time for them to adopt it.
Yeah, their ultimate deadline is June 30th. We have to have it back and complete by then. So I guess the caution of waiting a month is that we probably won't have any chance to make any changes to it next month. So if there were changes you wanted to make now,
well, that's the conundrum. If there's changes, they need to be reviewed by WDNR first.
Right, and if they don't approve them.
If they don't approve them, then we're looking at a special meeting in a rushed fashion at the end of June. I guess if everyone's willing to commit to a date at the end of June to schedule that meeting, we could entertain it, but it's a little bit risky. I'm not sure what we actually can change. I think if we approve the model ordinance and the maps, as flawed as they may be, especially for the maps, we can propose changes after that deadline. There's nothing precluding us from requesting additional changes, but because of the way DNR and FEMA set up the rules, you know, we've got a legislative gun to our head. We have to take action by a date or something bad happens to someone. It's, you know, that's how we get strong-armed into these things. But we can, after that occurs, we can make any number of requests for modifications to either of those. And I think there's an intent being signaled by the council to challenge some portions, if not all of the maps, in some way, shape, or form.
And I would just say, we sent the cards out last week, so we sent about 1,400 cards out. I spoke to probably between 50 and 70 people this week, asking how it impacts them directly. So I've had numerous conversations with a lot of residents. And I think one commonality is that when I told them that the council was questionable to the map's accuracy and they were going to look at doing something in the future, that was, I think, a good feedback for them to understand. So, and I did explain to all of them that there's really not much we can do without adopting these maps, but we can look at it after that fact and go forward. So I think most of the residents that I spoke to at least are supportive of that and are encouraged by the direction the council is looking to go.
Any other feedback, questions, or a motion? Did we have a motion? I don't think we have a.
You had a motion, you didn't have a second, however.
Okay.
So there would need to be a second for that to be a motion on the table officially.
So
I'll second it.
there's a motion and a second to table. Oh, that's. Oh, did I hear the city attorney correct? We have a motion to table?
It was, as I heard it, it was a motion to postpone to the next meeting.
Which is tabling, okay.
They're kind of the same, but technically different motions.
We could all abstain and the same thing happens. So there's a motion and a second to table. Okay, that's not debatable, so I'm gonna stop talking and call the roll, please.
Alderman Hancher,
No.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
No.
Alderman Talaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer.
7-2 to table. That's officially tabled until next month. Kind of have to add next month. That brings us on to personal appearances and public comment. Citizens wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda may do so at this time. If you desire to be heard on an agenda item, you may be heard when that item is considered on the agenda. Please speak into the microphone at the podium. Time limit is 5 minutes. I think we have one person pre-registered for this section of the meeting. Count Copy Fuller of 1415 South 92nd, number 210 in West Allis, Wisconsin. Something regarding a soliciting ordinance. Please approach the microphone.
I'd like to hand these things out to the board here.
Go right ahead.
Okay. My name is Count Copy Fuller, and I've been a Fuller brushman for over 50 years in the Milwaukee area. So if anybody knows something about soliciting, I think I can be a testament to that. Now, in today's world, people don't like solicitors that much in today compared to like 40 or 30 years ago. So I'm at the end of my career, so to speak. And so what I've done the last year and a half is I've checked on all the different municipalities on how their ordinances compare and if they're legal or illegal, if they're constructed. Now, that form you have before you, that statute was made by the state of Wisconsin about 25 years ago. It's called the Melinda Ordinance. and it only pertains to companies that bring in solicitors from out of state, and then they go around the different municipalities. I have been soliciting here, so it doesn't apply to me. Now, in the last month and a half, I came and I saw Carolyn in the last 3 weeks, and I gave her a copy of that, and I educated a lot of city clerks throughout the greater Milwaukee, Madison area. A lot of them weren't aware of this. And that's either the fault of workforce development or some city clerks. I mean, we can't know everything, can we? So I took the time, and I have a board here. This is just some of the town halls that I've been to and looked at their ordinances, and you'd be surprised at how different they are. There's not too much uniformity. So when I asked Caroline and dropped that information off a few weeks ago in the morning, lo and behold, a company called Active Environmental, who's been coming here for many years, in 3 or 4 hours later, 12 of those salespeople were in her lobby requesting an ordinance, to get their licenses approved. Now, if you read in that, the city halls, of all the city halls, what they should be doing is when an outside company provides these out-of-town reps coming in, they should first go to the state of Wisconsin and apply for that Melinda statute, which is to register with the state and then they get a permit or identification card. Then they should proceed to the local municipalities and get their proper paperwork at your place. Now, the only 2 cities in the entire state of Wisconsin that I was at that have conformed to that are the city of Brookfield and the city of Greenfield. And they implemented this years ago, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years. I mentioned to Caroline that, don't believe me, check with those 2 or check with workforce state, because it's not your ordinance, it's a state statute. So what I wanted to do, I'm making some new things up in my semi-retirement, which will help your residents be aware of. Some companies aren't coming to you first, they're sending their solicitors out because they don't know the boundaries from River Hills or Mequon. There is no, if you're an out-of-state young person or solicitor, I have a solution that I'm trying to implement in different municipalities as we speak. And as soon as I get some to implement it, I will come back and try to get you to go along with my recommendation. Is there any questions you have?
I don't think so at this time because we're not prepared to speak on this as it's not on the agenda. So we just listen during this. We don't have a conversation. I guess I will say don't blame the clerk. We make the code here, and some group of 8 or 9 people 30 years ago made what we have on the books, and it's very possible it's out of date with whatever the state is saying today. So,
well, 40 years ago, when I was 32, I'm 72 now, River Hills had a no soliciting ordinance, your sister municipality, and that was illegal. You have to allow soliciting with restrictions. And 40 years ago, they changed their ordinance. I just was in Lake Geneva, town of Lynn. They're changing their ordinance. They had no soliciting. So there are some municipalities, town of Oconomowoc Lake, you know the names. They all have variations on their, because they try to discourage solicitors from coming into their areas. I haven't looked at yours closely, but
well, we allow soliciting. I guess the 5 minutes has elapsed, so I'll just.
Okay. All right, so
I'll truncate this. We do allow soliciting. You just have to apply for a permit and register and all sorts of things. But we will look at this and do a legal scrub on it, and then
Well, I was just wondering if she did approve those 11 or 12 solicitors for APTA yet?
we,
I don't approve them.
no, she doesn't approve them. The subset of this group that is the Finance and Personnel Committee approves them, and I can't remember if they are on our agenda tonight or not, but I think we did approve them.
Was
We,
that
we seldom disapprove anyone unless the police department ran a background check and there's something concerning. But the 5 minutes is up. I thank you for bringing this forward. We'll definitely look into it, and I assume we'll hear from you again when you've done a little more research.
Right.
All right, thank you.
very much for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you again.
Sounds good. Brings us to public officials reports, unless there's someone else here who wishes to speak on something not on the agenda. I don't see anyone. Public officials reports, I'll cede my time. I would not add anything. City Administrator, anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just following up on the earlier agenda item regarding the open house discussed for May 29th. That'll be on Wednesday, May 29th, here in the Common Council chambers to review the new floodplain maps and the model ordinance that were both tabled this evening. The workshop will run from 9:30 a.m. all day until 7 p.m. in the evening, and staff is working to get representatives from both FEMA and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to attend the workshop during some or all of the hours that we'll be hosting that here in the council chambers. Postcards have been mailed out, as Assistant Director Zader mentioned earlier, to approximately 1,400 residents who are potentially affected by the changes that are being proposed. The maps, the new maps for 2024 are available on the city website for viewing prior to the workshop meeting. And there will also be a couple of staff presentations throughout the day at the workshop, taking place at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., and again at 6 p.m. in the evening. If anyone needs additional information on the floodplain map and model ordinance open house for Wednesday, May 29th, they can reach out to staff in the Department of Community Development at 262-236-2904. Thank you.
Thank you for those announcements. We are now at the consent agenda. We have 15 sets of meeting minutes from various boards and commissions or other staff reports. Is there a motion to approve them in bulk, or would anyone like one of those items set aside for discussion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We have just one additional ordinance from the other two from public hearing. Ordinance 2024-1663, an ordinance repealing and recreating the City of Mequon aldermanic district map due to 2024 Senate and Assembly redistricting. This was recommended by Public Welfare on April 9th in first reading, also last month at the Common Council on April 9th. Is there a motion or any discussion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any last comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that ordinance is adopted. Resolutions, Resolution 4117, a resolution appointing Marie Kaiser to the position of Acting Finance Director / City Treasurer. This was recommended earlier this evening by Finance and Personnel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Congratulations again. Next, Resolution 4118, a resolution awarding a contract for completion of a joint Mequon-Thiensville bicycle and pedestrian way planning study to Grafe Engineer of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the amount not to exceed of $70,000, and authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Village of Thiensville for the project's local share. This is recommended by the Joint Mequon Thiensville Bike and Pedestrian Way Commission on April 18th, and further recommendation forthcoming from Public Works this evening.
Public Works approved of it, and I move the resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. And a third even. Okay, we'll get to the vote in a second. Any discussion on this item?
Quick question.
Sure, Alderman Bach.
Was this the one where was it that Thiensville puts in 12%? Was that this?
Yes.
Okay, and I just was wondering
Yeah.
where those percentages come up with, or is that the same percentage for all Mequon Thiensville, or is it?
No.
How does that?
It's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't need to get the whole thing.
No,
This
no,
one-
they're paying their fair share.
Didn't know where
Yeah,
the 12%
well.
came from. Just was asking.
Well, do we know I'm assuming it's a legacy number used for all things bikeway, but I don't know.
Population, right?
That's based on population or number of prospective bikeway users. Is another way of thinking about it. Okay. Thank you for that question and the answer. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? If hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Tolaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
That resolution passes. On to Resolution 4119, a resolution rejecting bids received for the replacement of various HVAC units and other upgrades within the Common Council chambers at City Hall. Recommendation forthcoming from Public Works.
We approve this resolution 4119. And
I move approval.
I'll
Motion.
second it.
Motion and a second. Does anyone have any comments or questions for staff regarding this process? Do you
And
need any direction from us?
I was otherwise seeking some direction, as noted in the memo. The original project was bid with a number of alternatives. We're looking for direction from the council when we rebid the project on whether all of those alternatives should be included. And if you're so willing, giving this late hour to give us direction, maybe at a minimum on the ceiling selection.
What was did the committee have any recommendations? I was just going to call that question. Alderwoman Tolaco.
I discussed that we should go all in. You know, you kind of start with the maximum wish list and then you reel it back from there. We did have discussion about if the HVAC was to fail this summer, and that wouldn't really change the timing or anything. And if it was to fail, it would be failing coils, which is above my pay grade to understand all of it. So it's going to keep us on track. Rejecting these bids to rebid it at a more suitable price with the thinking that they were highly inflated because it was a true need. So they kind of knew that we needed it now, not later. If I'm understanding correct.
So we could approve the ceiling, the HVAC, the flooring, and then if as we get closer, we could look at the cost and see if we wanted to continue with all those improvements or we wanted to change some things.
So for those that were here at the time, you may recall that we had an issue when we bid the City Hall parking lot project, that we had a number of options. And so when we rebid the project, we bid it as a total package, signaling to the contractors that the intent was to do all of the work. But then we allowed for deductions, whereas there could have been things that would have been eliminated from the project, which resulted in better pricing. That's the process that the committee members were otherwise speaking to, with the idea of bidding all of it and then taking items out if it doesn't ultimately need the budget, which is correct. However, we are being told that the pricing would be better if we narrowed the ceiling options, because bidding it with 3 separate ceiling options feels to the contractor a little bit like a choose your own adventure and a non-commitment from the city to do any of the options, frankly. So if the council was so willing, we were otherwise seeking direction on the ceiling options, and if not, we can rebid it the way it otherwise was this round with the alternatives.
So does everyone have the ceiling options in front of them? I think those are packet pages
Yeah,
203, 4, and 5. One looks a lot like it does now, maybe not so popcorny.
Correct. No popcorn. It
No
would
popcorn.
be drywall and ideally less watermarks.
Ideally 0 watermarks.
Well, the other consideration was that if we went with one of the designs, they could hide the wiring for
Correct.
for the new technology.
Correct. If you can tell, the latter two include, and I'm probably going to use the wrong words, but essentially raceways along the walls so that any future technology, wiring, electrical, lighting, anything like that could essentially be hidden versus having to fish it into the
So
walls.
some
which
sort
is
of soffit type featured.
Yes.
I think that would be wise because we are sorely lacking in modern conveniences here, and as far as technology goes.
That would be my recommendation because being an older building, it would make sense to try to hide it the best way it could.
And there are going to be some technology upgrades, correct? But that's separate.
Well, I think if we decide to go all in and include technology as in scope.
Yeah. So which one you?
Here, I never get to do this, but if anybody's
Well, this feels a lot like a
I
planning
have
commission meeting now.
samples
Yeah.
of what the palette for the options otherwise are.
What do you have a preference on one of these, Kristen? 203, 204, 205. I mean, I like the looks of 204.
The latter two, so anything beyond the drywall, not only include the benefits of the raceways and the soffits as otherwise discussed, but also include the benefit of the acoustical panels. So as technology goes, as we have more upgrades in City Hall, they do provide those additional benefits beyond just the drywall itself.
I mean, I think this is a tired space. I think it should kind of needs a little freshening up, and I agree with Alder Tolaco. I mean, if we have an opportunity here to do something nice, it may not be everything that we want, but anything we can do to make it look a little better, I think now's a
So
chance.
late, I can't show you how beautiful our windows are, but that's something that's been on the list for quite a few years as well.
They look so much nicer when they freeze up in the winter. No doubt, yeah, it needs a refresh. So we really got to make a decision between, I think it's page 204 and 205.
Which are anticipated to be in order of increased pricing.
Oh, so 205 is more expensive than 204?
Correct.
I kind of think 204 looks nicer, but that's just me. I see a lot of show of hands, 204 or 205. 204. Page 204. 205 is even darker paneled wood and costs more. Then you won't see if it's drywall, you'll never see a stain on the drywall if the roof leaks. Do we? I sensed, show of hands, 204 again. Okay, we've got a majority. Okay. Okay, 204 it is. So we'll need to incorporate. Do we need to encapsulate that in the motion?
No.
Or is just enough? That's
Luckily,
enough.
the motion is mostly just to reject the bid.
Just to reject the bids. Perfect. So we have a motion and a second to reject bids. You've got the input you need?
Yes.
All in with page 204 is the ceiling treatment. Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor of rejecting the bids, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Bids are rejected. Resolution 4120, a resolution authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Village of Brown Deer for road improvements on County Line Road between Cedarburg Road and the railroad tracks east of 52nd Street and Garden Drive in the estimated amount of $445,000. Recommendation forthcoming from Public Works.
Public Works this evening approved of it.
Okay, is there a motion or any discussion?
I'll move the motion.
So a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Tolaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
and Alderman Bach.
Aye.
That resolution passes as well. Resolution 4121, a resolution approving award of three-year landscape maintenance contract for road medians and other public priorities to Northern Exposure Landscaping of Mequon, Wisconsin, at an annual cost of $35,000. A recommendation forthcoming from Public Works.
Public Works this evening approved of it, and I move the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Tolaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer, Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. On to Resolution 4122, a resolution approving a purchase of a replacement plow truck chassis from Truck Country of Oak Creek, Wisconsin, in the amount of $117,546. Recommendation also coming from Public Works.
And Public Works approve of it, and I will move the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? We don't buy whole plow trucks now. We buy them in pieces and make them because it's so hard to get plow trucks. Gotta love the post-COVID supply chain. Hearing no other discussion or seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Tolaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer, Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt.
Aye.
And that is approved. On to Resolution 4123, a resolution rejecting a carbon reduction program grant, CRP grant, and authorizing city staff to pursue a contract with We Energies for the replacement of 14 streetlights on Mequon Road between Valley Drive and the Milwaukee River. Recommendation forthcoming from Public Works.
Public Works approve of it, and I move the motion.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd send a message into Director Lundin, just asking the committee to consider a request I had from a resident about more streetlights at Oriole Lane, Lilac Lane, Robin Lane, Bobolink, and Mulberry, which do not have the same luminosity or brightness, leading to pedestrian concerns, especially at night, in particular for the Jewish community who is actively walking on these sidewalks in this neighborhood and gotten a lot of concerns over the years with not enough light. So this is a great opportunity to upgrade light, and appreciate the committee's support. And just wondering if you talked about doing more than 14 lights in areas where it could be brighter.
These 14 are the only city-owned ones on Mequon Road. So they're the only ones that are impacted both by the grant and by our request, or our request for the direction to be able to contract with We Energies. The other lights are either owned by another entity or would be upgraded through the We Energies LED process that we started last fall.
Thank you. So just to follow up, would you mind getting back to me in the future about just whose jurisdiction those are under, just so we could look at it a little?
Tim is back from his fishing
Yeah,
trip.
when you have
We will
time.
do-
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on these 14 lights? We have a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call or no? Is there, I guess there's some
The
fiscal impact, but maybe.
The contract will come back if we have one.
Okay, so no. All right. Any further input? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of rejecting the bids, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And they are rejected, or rejecting the grant, sorry. Resolution 4124, a resolution denying the request for sanitary service deferral agreement from the property located at 10056 North Cedarwood Road. This was, denying was not approved, so we approved the deferral at the Sewer Utility District Commission earlier this night. Is there a motion? Or any more discussion? Motion to approve the action we took in the prior meeting, though. A motion to approve the deferral. A motion.
Second.
And a second. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the deferral, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that resolution, well, the resolution failed, but the deferral is approved. Resolution 4125, a resolution authorizing designation of 2010 West Ranch Road as the replacement site for the construction of Lift Station E. Recommendation forthcoming from Sewer Utility District Commission earlier this evening. It was approved there, and we'll now take action as the council here.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion or comments in this body? We discussed it at length earlier at the Sewer Utility District. Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Telacco?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer? Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Bach?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
No.
Alderman Bratt?
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Aye.
That resolution passes 5-2. We have no unspecified business from prior meetings, specified unfinished business. Specified new business. We have two mayoral appointments, Board of Appeals, Stefan Helfer, member at large, and James Warzen. I probably butchered that last name. The alternate member, and Board of Review, Richard Muller, as an alternate member. And we have also two aldermanic appointments, Ethics Board, Luke Benke from District 8, and Barbara Levin from District 6. Is there a motion to approve these?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those appointments are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks.